I want you to picture a very specific, like an incredibly quiet scene.
Okay, set the stage for me.
Right. So it's 7:14 a.m. on a Friday morning. We're in Toledo, Ohio.
Got it.
And it's still dark outside. You know, that deep sort of bluish pre-dawn dark where everything is just still.
Yeah, that quiet time before the world wakes up.
Exactly. Inside this narrow little kitchen, the coffee hasn't even finished dripping into the carafe yet. And sitting there, illuminated only by just by the glow of her smartphone screen, is a 33-year-old pharmacy technician named Renata.
Okay.
She opens her banking app, and with just a few familiar taps, it's basically muscle memory at this point. She moves exactly $50 from checking to savings.
Just $50.
Just $50. Not 55 because she had a good week.
Yeah.
Not just whatever happens to be left over. Exactly $50.
Right.
And the detail that makes this so compelling, the thing that really hooked me, is that she has done this every single payday for 14 straight months.
Oh.
In total silence. She hasn't mentioned it to her sister, her coworkers, or literally a single soul.
It's just this completely invisible ritual.
Yeah.
But the financial and economic context surrounding that $50 transfer is what transforms this from, a nice little habit into something absolutely staggering.
Exactly. Because when you look at Renata's actual ledger, it defies almost every single piece of conventional financial wisdom.
It really does.
Her take-home pay is just $2,380 a month.
Right, which is tight.
Very tight. If you open any standard personal finance book right now, or, browse the major wealth building blogs, the underlying assumption is that she simply does not make enough money to save.
The math, according to the entire industry, just doesn't allow for it. The margins are way too thin.
And yet this woman, moving $50 in the dark while the coffee brews, is currently sitting on 3 full months of survival money.
That's incredible.
She is completely ahead of her own life, and she is steadily, mechanically on her way to a whole year of savings.
It completely shatters the accepted narrative. Traditional advice looks at a $2,300 monthly take-home and basically diagnoses a waiting room for financial disaster.
Right. They assume you're constantly on the brink.
Yeah, it assumes she is one flat tire away from total ruin. But instead, operating completely under the radar, she's building a literal fortress.
So how is she actually doing this? That's what we are unpacking today.
I'm ready.
We are doing a deep dive into a brilliant conceptual framework laid out in a YouTube video by a creator called William Explains Money. The video is titled The $50 Rule That Quietly Builds a Year of Savings.
It's such a fascinating breakdown.
It really is. So for everyone listening, by the time we finish this deep dive, you are going to walk away with 3 very specific things. First, how to identify your true monthly survival number.
Crucial step.
Second, how to calculate what we'll call your total brick count.
Yeah, that concept is a game changer.
And third, and perhaps most importantly, we're going to dissect the psychology of mental accounts. We really need to understand how human brains actually process money, because our cognitive wiring is often the exact thing that's sabotaging our long-term savings success.
That behavioral psychology aspect is really the linchpin of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because the reason this framework succeeds where others fail has surprisingly little to do with raw mathematics.
Really?
Yeah, it is almost entirely an exercise in behavioral design. It's about recognizing the emotional friction we experience when we interact with scarcity, and then building a system that just bypasses that friction entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this because we have to start with the failure part first, right?
You do.
If you're listening to this, statistically speaking, you have probably started a savings plan, felt really good about it for a few weeks, and then, watched it slowly fall apart.
Oh, almost everyone has.
And William makes this profound argument right up front. The reason we fail isn't a lack of discipline. It's because the advice we are constantly fed is fundamentally broken for the reality of the average person's paycheck.
Right. Let's look at the absolute cornerstone of modern financial advice. You hear it everywhere. Save 20% of your income. Or the classic, pay yourself first.
Right.
On a spreadsheet, that advice is mathematically flawless.
Sure, 20% is a nice, clean number.
But historically, that advice was formulated during eras and honestly, for demographics, that enjoyed predictable leftovers.
Leftovers, yeah.
It assumes there is a structural slack in your budget.
And for someone living in the modern economy, the phrase save 20% of your income immediately triggers this, it's huge defensive response.
Absolutely.
20% of what? Exactly. By the time rent clears, the car payment drafts, the insurance premiums hit, and you buy groceries, which are vastly more expensive than they were even 3 years ago, those fixed costs have already eaten the paycheck.
They've devoured it.
20% of nothing is zero. The financial advice industry hands out these rigid percentage plans to people whose core issue is a lack of surplus, and then they act shocked when the plan collapses.
It creates this awful cycle of misplaced guilt. To understand why these percentage plans are so disconnected from reality, we really have to look at the macroeconomic environment we're dealing with in 2026.
It's brutal out there.
It is. The data William highlights paints a brutal picture of what it means to be living close to the edge right now. Just look at the Federal Reserve's ongoing household surveys.
Okay, what are they saying?
They consistently find that nearly 4 in 10 American adults couldn't cover a $400 emergency with cash or its equivalent.
$400?
Yeah.
Which, if we are being completely honest, isn't even an emergency in the catastrophic sense.
Not at all.
That's a set of mid-tier tires. That's a minor plumbing issue where a guy comes out and just replaces one pipe. That is just a regular Tuesday. It's the routine maintenance of being alive.
It is entirely routine. And Bankrate's data frames it even more sharply. They show fewer than half of the country can handle a $1,000 surprise without resorting to borrowing.
Meaning credit cards.
Credit cards, predatory short-term loans, or leaning on family networks. But the most revealing data point, the one that completely dismantles the save 20% myth, comes from researchers at the J.P. Morgan Chase Institute.
Yes. This was the finding that completely recontextualized things for me.
It's staggering. They studied the actual bank account inflows of lower and middle income households. And what they found is that traditional advice assumes income is a flat, predictable line.
Like a salary that never changes.
Exactly. But in reality, for a massive segment of the population, income swings by double-digit percentages month to month.
Wow.
The paycheck is not a static number. It is actively, sometimes aggressively moving.
Think about the structural reasons for that, though. We live in an era of gig work, side hustles, and, algorithm-based scheduling in retail and healthcare.
Right. The machines are doing the schedules.
Yeah. You might get 38 hours one week and 24 hours the next week simply because a software program optimized the labor curve at your store. Your income is shifting wildly.
It's unpredictable.
It's like telling someone who is trying to balance on a seesaw that the secret to success is just to stand perfectly still.
That's a great analogy.
You can't stand perfectly still if the ground underneath you is constantly shifting by 15% every 3 weeks.
This raises an important question, though. Why does the advice industry keep handing out these rigid percentage plans?
Right.
Because when your income drops by 15% because you didn't get your usual shifts, a fixed 20% savings mandate doesn't just become difficult, it becomes mathematically impossible.
You literally don't have the dollars.
Exactly. A plan that demands a predictable monthly surplus from a structurally unpredictable paycheck is a complete fantasy. It's advice written for an executive with a fixed salary handed down to a shift worker.
And the emotional toll of that mismatch is immense because, you go online, you read an article telling you to be a responsible adult and save 20%.
Right.
You open a little savings calculator, punch in your very real, very thin margins, and the calculator basically tells you that you'll reach your goal in roughly 400 years.
Yeah, it's incredibly depressing.
So you just quietly close the tab, you internalize that, you absorb that as a personal failure, you carry this deep shame of just being bad with money.
And that psychological relief is the first major breakthrough William offers in the video. If you have ever quietly canceled an automated transfer, or if you've started a savings plan 3 separate times and watched all 3 basically die by the second month, the takeaway is crucial.
What's the takeaway?
You did not fail 3 times. The system failed you.
The system failed because it was load tested for a life with zero friction.
Right. Quitting a plan that demands surplus from an environment of scarcity isn't a sign of weakness. It is a highly rational, sane response from your brain.
Your brain is trying to protect you.
Exactly. Your mind is rejecting a system that threatens your immediate survival for the sake of some distant, abstract goal. It catches well-intentioned people constantly. In fact, it caught Renata twice before she abandoned conventional wisdom entirely.
To really see this crap in action, the deep dive contrasts Renata with her co-worker, Paulette. Paulette represents exactly what happens when you follow internet financial advice to the letter while living on an average paycheck.
Paulette is the perfect foil here. She and Renata work at the same pharmacy. They have the same tenure. Their take-home pay is nearly identical, like within $40 of each other.
That parity is important.
Extremely important because it proves the difference in their eventual outcomes is not a matter of pure income. It is entirely a matter of behavioral design.
So 14 months ago, they are on a lunch break talking about money, and they both decide it's time to get serious.
We've all had that moment.
Yeah, we have. So Paulette does what we are all socially conditioned to do. She picks a big, impressive, adult-sounding number. She decides definitively she's going to save $500 a month.
And saying $500 a month out loud feels incredibly validating.
It sounds so
It
good.
feels serious. It feels like you are finally taking control. And for the first 2 months, she actually pulls it off.
Ah, okay.
She skips some dinners out, she tightens the belt, and she hits the target. For 60 days, she feels like a completely new person. The plan is working.
But then month 3 arrives,
Yeah.
and that JP Morgan Chase data about income volatility rears its head. Her hours at the pharmacy get cut.
Just a little bit, but enough.
Suddenly, the math simply doesn't exist. She misses the $500 goal for the first time.
And it is in month 4 where the psychology of traditional savings plans becomes actively destructive.
What happens?
Well, in month 4, Paulette's brain, operating on the logic of standard goal setting, tells her that to catch up and stay on track with her impressive plan, she now needs to save $1,000.
Which is nearly half her entire monthly take-home pay. It's an absurd demand.
It is absurd. As William points out, the math just laughed at her. So what happens? She quits.
Just gives up.
She doesn't make an announcement. The automated transfer just quietly gets turned off in the app. Today, 14 months later, she is on her 4th attempt at restarting a massive plan, and her actual savings balance is sitting at absolute zero.
It's tragic because she has the willpower, she has the desire, she just keeps running headfirst into a structural wall.
Yeah.
To explain why Paulette's brain reacted that way, like why she went from highly motivated to completely paralyzed on S, William leans heavily on the work of Richard Thaler.
Oh, yes.
Thaler is a Nobel Prize-winning economist out of the University of Chicago, and his entire career has basically been about documenting the massive gap between what economic models say humans should do and what our brains actually do.
Thaler's research into behavioral economics is the absolute key to unlocking this. He is most famous for championing the concept of mental accounting. Mental accounting, let's break that down. Okay, so in classical economics, money is completely fungible. Fungible. Fungibility just means that a dollar is a dollar is a dollar. It is perfectly interchangeable regardless of where it came from, where it is stored, or what it is meant for. A dollar in your left pocket is mathematically identical to a dollar in your bank account.
But that's not how human beings actually operate in the real world.
Not at all. Thaler proved that we subconsciously violate the rule of fungibility every single day. We sort our money into different cognitive buckets or mental accounts.
Right.
We have a mental account for rent, a mental account for groceries, a mental account for emergencies, and a mental account for fun. And the critical insight here is that we apply entirely different emotional rules and risk tolerances to each of these buckets.
How does that specifically explain Paulette crashing in month 4, though? I mean, she was putting money into her savings bucket, right?
It comes down to how these mental accounts process the scale of our goals. Thaler's work suggests that we treat massive, distant goals, like saving $20,000 for a fully funded emergency reserve, very differently than we treat small, immediate actions.
Okay, I'm with you.
So when Paulette missed month 3, she looked at her current balance, maybe $1,000, and then she looked all the way up at her ultimate goal of, say, $15,000 or $20,000.
It's the view from the bottom of the mountain.
Exactly. When you have $1,000 saved and you are staring at a $20,000 finish line, the gap between where you are and where you need to be is vast.
That's huge.
And in behavioral economics, that gap doesn't just sit there passively on a spreadsheet. It actively does the talking.
What do you mean by that?
That giant number votes against you. It creates a cognitive load that just whispers, you are so far away, this catching up is impossible, why even bother?
I really want to push back on this, though,
Okay, go.
because it flies in the face of modern productivity culture. Every corporate goal-setting system, every self-help book, every fitness app on my phone tells us to define the massive end goal.
Right, visualize success.
Exactly. We're told to manifest the big number, keep our eyes on the prize. Why does visualizing the finish line cause someone with great intentions, like Paulette, to completely trip and fall?
Because there is a profound neurological difference between a goal that inspires action and a goal that induces paralysis.
Oh, that's interesting.
When a goal is overwhelmingly massive and your daily contribution is relatively tiny, your brain struggles to process the causal connection between the daily effort and the final outcome. It's an issue of goal proximity.
Goal proximity.
Yeah. William phrases this brilliantly in the video. Big plans don't die of math, they die of the view.
They die of the view.
Paulette didn't physically run out of money in month 4. She ran out of psychological morale because the view of catching up on a massive mandate against an even bigger end goal was cognitively crushing.
They die of the view. That hits really hard because if you've ever tried to write a novel or, I don't know, lose 50 pounds or save $20,000, staring at the totality of the task completely crushes your willingness to take the very first step.
It absolutely does.
You look at the mountain and you just decide to stay on the couch.
Precisely. The cognitive friction is just too high. And this is why William emphasizes the sting of Paulette's story. If you recognize yourself in Paulette, if you have quietly canceled a transfer, or you are on your 4th restart, you need to just sit with that realization for a minute.
Yeah.
That sting is not a character flaw. It is a diagnostic tool. Your plan failed because it required a level of predictable surplus and unwavering emotional momentum that a dynamic, unpredictable life simply does not offer.
So, if looking at the giant mountain destroys your motivation, how do we fundamentally fix the view? How did Renata, who makes the exact same hourly wage, avoid this trap?
This brings us to the core philosophy of the framework. And what's fascinating here is that Renata didn't get this insight from a wealth manager in a corner office.
Right.
She got it from a guy who lays tile.
Yes, her uncle. He worked as a tile setter for 31 years. He did kitchens, corporate lobbies, and apparently one massive hotel pool that he never, ever stopped bragging about.
Everyone has that uncle with the one legendary blue-collar story.
Everyone. So Renata is looking at these massive, beautiful, incredibly complex floors. He installs floors that take months of backbreaking labor to complete. And she asks him, honestly, how he could stand it.
Yeah, how do you face that every day?
Exactly. How could he tolerate working on a single project for months, staring at this huge, empty concrete room every morning? And his response is the foundational philosophy of this entire savings rule.
His response is an absolute masterclass in cognitive reframing. He looked at her and said, I've never set a floor in my life. I set the next tile.
I set the next tile. It completely reframes the nature of the work.
It shrinks the cognitive load down to a totally manageable unit. He didn't think about the 5,000 square foot hotel lobby. The lobby was an abstract concept. It was none of his business on a Tuesday morning. His only business, his sole focus, was making sure that the one single ceramic tile right in front of his face was laid level, true, and secure. And then, only when that was done, did he worry about the next one. He operated like that for 31 years, and as William notes in the video, behind him lay acres of finished floor.
He removed the view. He didn't look at the mountain. He only looked at the next step.
Exactly.
So Renata takes this profound piece of wisdom home. She is sitting in the wreckage of her own failed savings plans, and she asks herself the defining question, what is my tile?
Translating that tile metaphor into personal finance requires a very specific and honestly somewhat painful exercise. You have to identify what William calls your survival number.
Okay, what is that?
This is not your aspirational budget.
Yeah.
This is not the budget that includes the streaming services, the vacations, or buying new clothes.
Right.
This is the stripped-down, brutally honest mathematics of keeping the lights on and keeping your physical person safe.
The rigor of this is so important. No fantasy budgeting. William lists exactly what makes the cut. Rent or mortgage, basic utilities, groceries, health insurance, essential transport to keep your job, and a phone, period.
That's it?
Everything else is a luxury in this specific calculation. When Renata executed this stripped-down math, her monthly survival number came out to $1,700 a month.
Okay.
Which means to survive for an entire year without a single paycheck, she needs $20,400.
$20,400. That is the size of the lobby she is trying to tile.
Right.
But before we get into the mechanics of how she actually builds that, we really have to talk about what life feels like before that number is secured. The video paints a very vivid picture of Renata's financial reality 18 months ago, and it's characterized by intense chronic stress.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the phrase William uses to describe her life is incredible. He He says her life wasn't poverty exactly, it was precision.
Oh, that's such a good way to put it.
Isn't it? Every single dollar was assigned before it even hit the account. Every month was a complex landing you had to stick perfectly. She was living on what he calls $12 of slack.
$12 of slack. That is the razor-thin margin between a completely calm week and a spiraling crisis.
Let's just linger on that feeling for a second. $12. That means you are making micro decisions all day long, fueled by cortisol.
Yeah, constantly stressed.
It's deciding you can't buy a slightly nicer brand of coffee because that $3 difference might bounce an auto draft on Thursday.
Right.
It's the physical sensation of holding your breath every time you turn the key in the ignition, terrified the engine will make a new sound. William describes a specific Tuesday night, 11:52 p.m., where Renata is sitting at her kitchen table doing frantic math over a $65 school field trip form for her kid.
Which requires moving money between columns, like trying to rearrange furniture in a room that is entirely too small.
It's impossible.
To find a spare $65, she had to restructure the architecture of her entire month.
It is deeply exhausting. The cognitive bandwidth that requires is just immense, and that was the night she admitted the terrifying reality out loud to herself. One missed paycheck and everything falls.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, specifically the behavioral science, like the work of researchers like Sendhil Mullainathan on the psychology of scarcity, that exhaustion is literal.
Literal exhaustion.
Yes, scarcity imposes a massive bandwidth tax on the brain.
Right.
When you are constantly doing 11:52 p.m. math, your IQ actually drops.
Wait, really? Your actual IQ drops?
Yes, your executive function is measurably depleted because your brain is overworked. Knowing your baseline survival number, that $1,700 for Renata, is the ultimate foundation of reclaiming that cognitive bandwidth.
Because you know the bottom line.
Exactly. When you don't know exactly what it costs to simply exist for a month, your financial anxiety is boundless. It's this infinite, vague dread sitting in the back of your mind. But when you write down the absolute necessities and arrive at a concrete number, you cage the monster.
I love that. You cage the monster.
You quantify exactly what survival looks like. It removes the mystery, even if the final number is intimidating.
Okay, so she cages the monster. She has the number, 20,400 for a whole year.
Right.
But we know from Thaler and from Paulette's catastrophic failure that if she just stares at a chart that says 20,400, she's going to quit by month 3, the view will kill the plan.
Yes, it will.
So how does she build the wall without actually looking at the wall? This is where we get into the actual mechanics of the system.
Okay, so this is move 1, the brick. A brick is strictly, unalterably defined as $50.
$50.
Your emergency fund is only allowed to exist, conceptually, in this specific unit. Not a dynamic percentage, not a random amount you feel like contributing because you had a good week, just a rigid, boring $50.
So to figure out her target, Renata takes her yearly survival number, that 20,400, and divides it by 50. The math on that comes out to 408.
408 bricks.
She needs 408 bricks to build a wall that provides a full year of shelter. But here is the behavioral hack that blew my mind. She writes the number 408 down exactly once on a piece of paper, and then she never looks at it again.
This is her uncle's wisdom weaponized. This is eliminating the lobby to focus purely on the tile.
But wait, I have to challenge this.
Go for it.
Every behavioral framework I've ever read, every app on my phone is obsessed with progress bars. We love crossing things off lists. We are taught that visualizing progress is the key to dopamine release.
Right, gamification.
Yeah. She did all this hard math to find out she needs 408 bricks, and then she forces herself to forget the finish line. Doesn't she need to track her progress against that macro goal to feel a sense of accomplishment?
It seems entirely counterintuitive to the gamified world we live in, I agree. But remember Thaler's concept of mental accounts and the cognitive weight of the gap.
Okay, the gap.
If you track your progress against the number 408 every time you lay a single brick, you are constantly resurrecting the giant number that kills motivation.
Oh.
Imagine laying your very first brick, and you look at a chart that says 1 out of 408 completed. Your brain does not register that as a victory. The goal of proximity is way too low.
Right, you just see how far you have left.
Exactly. Your brain registers the 407 missing bricks. It feels despair. The gap does the talking.
So in this specific context, tracking the gap is actually toxic to consistency.
It's completely toxic. By hiding the total count from herself, she effectively blinds herself to the view of the lobby. Her identity shifts. Her job is no longer the massive, daunting task of saving for a year. Her only job is setting the next tile.
Wow.
And from that day forward, her entire savings life was reduced to one automated, hyper-local move.
And this brings us full circle to our opening scene in Toledo. Every other Friday, 7:14 a.m. Before the coffee is ready, before she has time to check her balance and feel poor, before the month can object with a sudden new expense. One $50 brick moves automatically from checking to savings.
Automating it in the early morning is highly strategic regarding decision fatigue, by the way.
How so?
Willpower is a finite biological resource. By Friday afternoon, after a grueling week on her feet at the pharmacy, her willpower is totally dead.
Makes sense.
If you require yourself to manually choose to move that money on a Friday evening, your brain will find a highly rational-sounding excuse not to.
Oh, totally. I need this for takeout tonight. I earned it.
Exactly. A machine, however, doesn't get tired. A standing digital transfer never has a bad week. The discipline only had to happen once on the day she set up the automation.
I love the automation, and the psychology is brilliant. But let's be real for a second.
Okay.
I am doing the math. You are doing the math. At $50 every other Friday, so roughly $100 a month, reaching 408 bricks, is going to take, what, like 17 years?
It's a long time.
It feels like we just traded one frustrating, impossible math problem for a glacially slow one.
That math objection is entirely valid. If Move 1 was the entirety of the system, it would take nearly 2 decades. But Move 1, the automated payday brick, is merely the heartbeat.
The heart.
It just proves the system is alive. The actual construction of the wall, the mechanism that accelerates the timeline exponentially, happens in Move 2.
Let's get into Move 2, which William calls the secret engine of the plan, the conversion. This is entirely about how you handle freed or found money.
Right. Throughout a given year, almost everyone encounters money that isn't part of their standard, predictable paycheck calculation.
Okay, like what?
This could be money you free up by canceling a recurring expense, or money you find through a sudden windfall, or picking up extra work. The rule requires a merciless 24-hour capture window for any of this money. It must be converted into bricks immediately.
William gives some fantastic, highly relatable examples from Ranada's actual life here. First, she had a storage unit she was renting for $89 a month across town.
We all have one of those subscriptions or units.
Right. And she'd been avoiding dealing with it because cleaning out a storage unit is objectively a terrible way to spend a Saturday.
It's the worst.
But she finally goes, cleans it out, and cancels the contract. Now, under traditional mental accounting, that $89 would just sort of bleed back into her checking account. It would become fungible again.
Exactly.
And because she lives on $12 of slack, she'd unconsciously absorb it. She'd buy slightly better groceries or take an Uber instead of the bus once. It would just dissolve.
But under the $50 rule, freed money is not allowed to dissolve back into the general operating account. It converts.
It converts.
So that $89 is immediately captured and transformed into one extra brick every single month, plus some change. It's laid the same day every month forever. She effectively hired a new bricklayer.
Then there's finding extra active income. She picked up a side shift covering a weekend for a sick coworker. That extra cash didn't become a nice dinner out. It immediately converted into 2 bricks.
Boom.
And then there's the truly random stuff. She got an unexpected car insurance refund in the mail. It was enough to create exactly 1 brick with 39 cents left over. And William notes she kept the 39 cents in checking just for the joy of it.
Nice little treat.
But the biggest conversion, the one that really moved the needle and tests the psychology of this rule, was her tax refund.
Ah, yes, the tax refund. In behavioral economics, the tax refund is where the majority of well-intentioned savings plans go to completely die. She received $1,140.
Now imagine living on $12 of slack, doing 11:52 p.m. math just to survive, and suddenly an electronic deposit for $1,100 lands in your account. The physiological urge to spend that, to just relieve the pressure, must be overwhelming.
It is completely overwhelming, and Thaler's research explains exactly why we succumb to it. What's fascinating here is how our mental accounts handle windfalls.
Okay, tell me.
When money arrives outside of our normal expected paycheck cycle, like a tax refund, a holiday bonus, or a gift, our brain rarely categorizes it as serious survival money. Because we didn't clock in for it.
Because we didn't actively bleed for it that specific week. So it gets sorted directly into what Thaler categorizes as a windfall or fun money account. And because it's mentally tagged as a bonus, the risk tolerance goes way up and it evaporates at double speed.
Right. You buy a new TV, you Book a weekend trip you couldn't otherwise afford, and within a month, it's gone.
Completely gone, leaving no structural improvement to your life whatsoever.
It's so true. It feels like monopoly money. It doesn't feel like the money you sweat for at the pharmacy.
Yeah.
So how does the conversion rule aggressively fight that human psychology?
The antidote is the strict 24-hour capture window. The rule dictates that the moment you receive that windfall, you have exactly 1 day to convert it into $50 units.
1 day.
1 day. You do not let it sit in your primary checking account for a week, where you can look at it, get used to the higher balance, and start dreaming about what to buy. You capture it immediately. So for Rana, that refund.
For Renata, that $1,140 refund was instantly divided by 50 and converted into 22 bricks. Laid, counted, and moved into the fortress within 24 hours.
It's like setting a trap for your own money before your brain even registers that you possess it.
That's a great way to put it.
It's like if you leave a giant, expensive chocolate bar sitting on your kitchen counter for a week, you're going to eat it.
Oh, absolutely.
Eventually, your willpower will degrade on a Tuesday night and you'll eat it. But if you lock it in a biometric safe, the literal second you walk through the front door, you won't. The 24-hour window is the safe.
That's exactly the mechanism. The conversion is how a seemingly sluggish $50 a paycheck habit secretly builds momentum at a $400 a month pace. You are aggressively auditing all the financial inefficiencies and windfalls in your life and turning them into solid, tangible shelter.
Okay, so we have the steady automated heartbeat of the payday brick, and we have the powerful engine of the conversions accelerating the timeline. But what happens when things are going really well? That brings us to move 3. I'm going to be perfectly honest, when I first heard this part of William's breakdown, I thought it was completely backward.
Move 3.
Move 3 is called the ceiling.
It is arguably the most counterintuitive part of the entire system, but it is the exact mechanism that prevents you from accidentally turning back into Paulette.
So the rule is this. Under the $50 rule, you are never allowed to make a proactive savings decision bigger than $50, ever.
Never.
William explicitly states that even if you are having a fantastic month, your expenses were low, you feel flush with cash, and you think, you know what, I'm going to put in $300 this month, I'm feeling strong. You don't. The rule strictly forbids it.
And why did your instinct initially reject that?
Because if I have $300 extra this month and I am feeling ambitious, motivated, and financially secure, why on earth would a savings framework tell me not to save my own money? Shouldn't I be capitalizing on that positive momentum to build the wall faster?
It sounds incredibly logical to ride the wave of momentum, right?
Right.
But William cuts right to the psychological danger of that instinct. The ambition that compels you to put $300 in on a really good month is the exact same emotional ambition that will cause you to quit entirely on a bad month.
Oh, wow. It's the same muscle.
Yes, it's the muscle of volatility. If you allow yourself to ride the dopamine high of a massive $300 deposit, you are reintroducing drama and emotional stakes into a system designed to be completely devoid of them.
You're getting addicted to the big wins.
You are starting to chase the high of large numbers. You are subconsciously looking at the view of the lobby again.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
And when you do that, what happens when the next month is terrible? What happens when your hours get cut and you have $0 extra? If your brain is accustomed to the dopamine hit of saving 300, saving 50 suddenly feels like a failure.
And saving $0 feels like a catastrophe.
An absolute catastrophe. The ceiling exists to keep the plan utterly fundamentally boring.
Boring is the point. You are trying to strip the emotion out of the math.
Boring is the deliverable. You lay a single automated brick, or you lay a few bricks through quick conversions, but it is always just a mechanical, repetitive action. One small unit at a time. It removes the ambition. It removes the ego.
Yeah.
And here is the true magic of the ceiling. If you have a terrible month and your kid gets sick or your car breaks down and you have to pause the automation and lay 0 bricks, the wall doesn't judge you.
The wall doesn't judge. That is such a stark contrast to Paulette's percentage plan, which required $1,000 just to catch up.
Exactly. When a percentage plan misses a month, William notes that it dies of shame.
Dies of shame.
A percentage plan demands consistency of output regardless of your life circumstances, but a brick wall just waits.
It just sits there.
If you lay 0 bricks in October, the wall does not crumble. It is exactly as tall and provides exactly as much shelter as it did in September. And when November rolls around and you stabilize, the next brick is still exactly $50.
There's late fees.
No late fees, no compounding catch-up math, no shame, As the uncle said, you don't save a year, you just lay the next brick.
This is a profound psychological shift. The ceiling protects you from your own fleeting enthusiasm just as much as it protects you from your own inevitable despair. It keeps you on an entirely even keel.
It really does.
Okay, so we've built the machine. We have the $50 heartbeat, the conversion engine to trap the windfalls, and the ceiling keeping our egos grounded. Now we need to see what happens when the rubber meets the road, or rather, when the brakes literally grind.
Yes, William gives us a vital moment where real life crashes into this beautifully constructed machine.
Yeah.
We need to address the lingering objection directly.
A timeline.
Right, because yes, even with the conversions, reaching 408 bricks is not a weekend project.
He is very transparent about the timeline. At Renata's real-world pace, hitting the full 408 bricks, that fully funded year of survival landed just under 4 years from the day she started.
4 years.
4 years. To a lot of people, that sounds like an agonizingly long time to wait for financial security.
It does. But that objection fundamentally misunderstands the physics of an emergency fund. William states a brilliant truth in the video. An emergency fund doesn't have to be finished to be working.
Yes. Let's track her actual progress. In month 4, because of her steady payday bricks and a couple of early conversions, Renata banked her first full month of survival.
1 month down.
She hit 34 bricks, which equals her $1,700 survival number. And month 4, William notes, is the exact month that those 11:52 p.m. frantic panic math sessions ended forever.
Just 1 month of buffer was enough to change the chemical makeup of her nervous system. She regained her cognitive bandwidth.
And then we get to month 11.
Oh, this is the ultimate stress test of the framework.
Her car brakes started grinding, the real terrifying metal-on-metal grinding sound.
The sound that makes your stomach literally drop.
She takes it to the shop, and the repair bill comes in at $380. Now let's look at the baseline. 18 months ago, before the $50 rule, a sudden $380 expense would have been apocalyptic for her.
Total disaster.
It would have meant rearranging bills, definitely paying something late, incurring late fees, and massive psychological stress. So what happens in month 11?
And she goes to the mechanic. She stands at the shop counter. She swipes her card and pays the $380. She gets her keys, and she drives home. And William points out what is so incredible about this moment. It's what didn't happen.
So what does this all mean? What didn't happen?
Nothing happened. There was no emotional spiral. There was no midnight kitchen table session trying to move numbers around. 7.5 bricks simply came off a wall that, by that point, held 4 full months of them.
The wall just absorbed the kinetic impact of the emergency.
Exactly. She actually told her sister later that it was the most expensive yet deeply boring afternoon of her life.
And that word boring comes back again as the ultimate goal. William emphasizes that the product being sold in this framework isn't actually the $20,400. The product is the boring afternoon.
The product is the quietness in your mind. It's the absence of panic when a $380 expense hits. If you're waiting to feel safe until the entire wall is finished, you have completely misunderstood what walls are for.
Right.
Every single course of bricks provides shelter along the way. The panic dies in the first mile, long before the year is fully saved.
Every course of bricks is shelter. It completely validates the slow, steady effort, even if it takes 4 years. But before we wrap this up and give everyone their marching orders, William drops in 2 very crucial caveats to this system.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure we cover them because they separate genuine, actionable financial advice from, toxic positivity.
These caveats are absolutely vital. The first caveat addresses what he calls the income gap.
Right. He clearly states that if your income sits purely below your survival line,
Meaning, if your honest, stripped-down survival number is $2,000 a month and you only bring home $1,500 a month no matter how many shifts you work.
then the math is structurally negative before a single brick is even laid.
And in that specific scenario, the $50 rule is not a shame instrument. You do not have a savings habit issue. You have a structural income and benefits issue.
Which is a completely different fight.
Exactly. Pretending that a clever behavioral savings trick can fix a fundamental income gap is terrible, damaging advice. Laying bricks is not your first move if you are structurally in the negative.
You have to fix the leak first.
You have to have the much harder conversations about increasing hours, raising your hourly rate, finding new employment, or accessing social safety nets first. You have to get to 0 before you can start building to 50.
I deeply appreciate that distinction rather than just promising this is some magical cure-all for poverty.
Yeah, it's very responsible.
What is the second caveat?
The second caveat is about the physical location of the wall, where the bricks live. This rule assumes you are not just stuffing $50 bills under a mattress or leaving it in a checking account that yields nothing.
Right, where do they go?
Renata's wall sits in a high-yield savings account. In the macroeconomic context of 2026, these accounts are paying roughly 4% annual percentage yield, or APY.
Let's actually break down how a high-yield savings account changes the physical structure of this plan. If she has this money sitting in an account yielding 4% annually, what does that actually do for the wall over time?
It means that once the wall has some mass to it, the math starts to aggressively work for you through compounding interest. Let's look at the finished product.
Okay, 20,400.
At a 4% yield, a finished wall of 20,400 will generate about $816 in interest over a year. Divide that by our $50 brick unit, and that means the wall is quietly laying about 16 of its own bricks a year without Renata having to do a single thing.
The wall effectively hires itself.
Exactly. The compounding interest acts as an autonomous secondary bricklayer. Even while she is building it, say she has 100 bricks, which is $5,000 at 4%, that generates $200 a year, which is 4 free bricks.
It accelerates the timeline.
It does, but William deliberately introduces that explanation late in the process because optimizing the APY and finding the absolute best account is a secondary optimization step.
Right.
If you obsess over finding a 4.5% yield instead of a 4% yield, but you haven't built the automated habit, you are optimizing a zero balance. The behavioral foundation has to come first.
We have covered massive ground here today. We've talked about the structural trap of leftovers in a volatile gig economy, the cognitive paralysis caused by the view of big numbers, the uncle's tile metaphor for shrinking cognitive load, the rigorous honesty of the survival number, and the 3 defining moves: the automated brick, the 24-hour conversion engine, and the ego-checking ceiling.
It's a lot to process, but it's so powerful.
To close us out, I want to summarize the 3 immediate, actionable steps for anyone listening to this right now. If it's an ordinary Tuesday evening and you want to completely change your financial trajectory, here is your playbook.
Step 1. Find your real survival number, the stripped, brutally honest one. Rent, food, utilities, transport, insurance, phone. Nothing else.
Nothing else.
Take that yearly number, divide it by 30 to get your total brick count. Write that specific count down on a piece of paper once, and then put the paper away forever. Do not track it. Do not let the gap do the talking. Let the ceiling work.
Step 2. Set up the automated payday brick. Do this before you go to sleep tonight. Log into your banking app and make it the very first automated transaction of your pay cycle. Because remember, your biological willpower will be utterly spent by Friday afternoon, but a standing digital transfer has never once had a bad week.
And step 3, start your conversion list today. From this day forward, every subscription fee you finally cancel, every forgotten drip of money you plug, and every unexpected windfall or tax refund you receive has a standing destination within a strict 24-hour window.
No exceptions.
No exceptions. Capture it and convert it into bricks before your brain can categorize it as fun money.
I want to leave you with one final contrast from William's breakdown. Think about those 2 mornings. Somewhere across town, Paulette is waking up staring at a massive complex spreadsheet and drafting restart number 4 around another giant, impressive, fundamentally doomed number.
Yeah.
But in that dark kitchen in Toledo, Renata is just moving $50. She's not thinking about the year. She's not stressed about the macroeconomy. She's just setting one tile level and true. The best possible morning to lay your first brick is the one you wake up to tomorrow.
And I'd like to leave you with a thought to mull over, one that expands on the underlying philosophy we've explored today. If we recognize that a financial wall provides profound shelter and reduces cognitive load long before the roof is ever finished, how many other areas of your life are you treating like a failed percentage plan?
Oh, that's a great question.
Think about your career trajectories, your fitness journeys, or your education. Are you abandoning your efforts just because you're comparing your daily single brick to the view of someone else's finished mansion? What if, starting tomorrow, you allowed your progress in all these areas to be entirely wonderfully boring and simply trusted the compounding math of setting the next tile?
I want you to picture 2 apartments. Just visualize them. They are in the exact same city, the exact same building, and the rent is virtually identical.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. So let's walk into the first apartment. Now, this one belongs to someone earning $95,000 a year.
which is a really solid upper middle class income.
Exactly. It's a great salary. You step inside, and immediately your eyes are just drawn to this massive 75-inch television mounted on the wall.
Right, the classic centerpiece.
Oh, totally. And right below it is this pristine leather sectional that, I mean, it easily cost $4,000 or $5,000.
Definitely.
Then you walk into the kitchen, and the counters are just lined with high-end stainless steel appliances. You know, espresso machines, stand mixers, air fryers.
And let me guess, a lot of them are probably still sitting in their original boxes.
Yes, exactly. You open the closets, and they are absolutely bursting. I'm talking about a shocking number of garments that still have the store tags attached to them.
I think we all know someone exactly like this, or we've been this person.
Right. And there's even a spare bedroom in this apartment, but you can barely open the door. It's just been converted into this makeshift storage unit for items that haven't seen the light of day since the last time this person moved.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff.
But here's the kicker. Despite earning that solid income, this person checks their bank account with a literal knot in their stomach.
Oh, absolutely. The anxiety is real.
It really is. I mean, they are exactly 2 missed paychecks away from a total unmitigated financial crisis.
It's a very precarious way to live. But the thing is, it's incredibly common.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tend to associate that level of financial anxiety with low-income earners, but the data consistently shows a massive percentage of high earners living exactly this way.
That's wild.
It is. And the contrast with that second apartment you mentioned, the one across the hall, that's where this dynamic gets truly fascinating.
Right, so let's walk across the hall to that second apartment. This one belongs to someone earning $52,000 a year.
So almost half the income of their neighbor.
Exactly, almost half. You step inside, and the very first thing you notice isn't the furniture, or the electronics. It's the space.
Ah, I love that.
Yeah, you have actual physical breathing room. There's a modest, really comfortable couch, a reasonably sized television.
Just the essentials, basically.
Exactly. You walk into the kitchen, and it only contains the exact tools that get used on a regular basis. The closet is curated. Everything in there is something that actually gets worn.
And I bet that spare bedroom is actually functional.
You nailed it. It's set up as a welcoming guest room. But here is the absolute most important distinction between the two.
What's that?
This person checks their bank account with absolute calm confidence.
Wow. That's the dream, right?
It is. They have 18 months of living expenses saved up, and they comfortably invest 20% of every single paycheck.
You know, when you lay it out like that,
Yeah.
it completely shatters our cultural assumptions about income and stability.
Right, because you have two people in the exact same neighborhood facing the same cost of living.
Yeah. But the person earning nearly half as much has built 10 times the financial security.
Which is just crazy to think about. And, when we look at a scenario like this, the immediate reflex is to search for a hidden flaw in the higher earner.
Oh, for sure. We assume they must have like a massive gambling problem or crippling student loans, right?
Exactly. Some theatrical, obvious financial disaster happening behind the scenes, but that is almost never the case.
No, it's usually much more subtle than that.
The first person isn't, quote unquote, bad with money in a way that would make for a dramatic reality TV show. They've simply and almost invisibly accumulated a lifestyle that requires every single dollar they earn just to maintain its baseline existence.
Right. It's just a constant drain.
So to the listener, I want to make this clear. This isn't a story about income disparity. It's a story about the hidden, highly toxic relationship between stuff and money that keeps intelligent, high-earning people completely broke.
And that right there, that is the core paradigm shift we need to establish right here at the beginning of this deep dive.
Let's get into it.
The second person, the one earning $52,000, has discovered a fundamental truth about modern economics. Owning less doesn't mean living worse.
Say that again, because that's huge.
Owning less doesn't mean living worse. In fact, it means living deliberately. And that intentional, deliberate living is exactly what creates the financial margin that most high earners never get to experience.
So for today's mission, we are going to unpack a definitive, actionable, 4-step plan for beginners to start building that financial margin today.
I love it.
We're going to explore how shedding the weight of physical accumulation doesn't just clear up floor space. It literally buys back your freedom.
But before we get into the practical mechanics of the 4-step plan,
Yeah.
the saving and investing, we have to completely dismantle how we think about the very act of purchasing an item.
Right, the invisible price tags.
Exactly. We have to look at the invisible price tags attached to everything we own. Because if you don't understand exactly why it's so hard to save in the first place, no budgeting app is ever going to work.
It's so true. I mean, the money isn't mysteriously disappearing into the ether, right? It's being quietly, continuously siphoned by the things we have already purchased.
Yes. The grand illusion of modern consumption is that when you buy something, you pay for it once.
Right. You hand over your card, get a receipt, and you're done.
That's what we think. The transaction is complete, and now you own the item. But the reality of ownership is entirely different. Everything you own actually costs you money twice.
Okay, so the first cost is the obvious one, right? The entry fee, the number printed on the receipt.
Exactly. But there is a second cost that we are culturally conditioned to completely ignore. And over the lifespan of the object, this second cost is almost always larger than the first.
What does that second cost look like?
It's an ongoing combination of physical storage, maintenance, mental energy, and opportunity cost.
Let's break down the storage aspect first, because when you actually run the numbers on this, it completely reframes how you look at your living room.
It really does. When you buy a physical object, it has to live somewhere in your house, right?
Right. It takes up space.
And the square footage in your home is absolutely not free. Far from it.
I mean, if you look at real estate and rental data in most urban areas, residential space costs roughly $30 to $50 per square foot annually.
Exactly. So let's apply that to a classic, well-intentioned impulse buy. Let's talk about the treadmill.
Oh man, the classic treadmill.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
You buy a treadmill and you have to put it somewhere in your house. When you factor in the footprint of the machine and the clearance space required to safely use it, a standard treadmill occupies about 20 square feet of your home.
Okay, so if we just do the basic math on the real estate it occupies,
Yeah.
you are paying somewhere between $600 and $1,000 a year in implicit rent just to store a piece of exercise equipment.
Right.
And let's be entirely honest about human nature here. For the vast majority of people, that treadmill functions as a very expensive, very bulky clothes hanger for like 350 days of the year.
It's true. It's an incredible invisible tax. You are paying $1,000 a year in physical real estate to host an object that just makes you feel guilty every time you walk past it.
That is painfully relatable. But the spatial cost is just the beginning, right?
Yeah, the far more dangerous financial drain comes from what economists call the lifestyle multiplier effect.
The lifestyle multiplier effect. Okay, explain that.
This is the phenomenon where a single, seemingly isolated purchase triggers an entire hidden cascade of secondary and tertiary costs.
I see exactly how that plays out. Think about buying a boat.
Oh, the boat is the perfect example.
Right. Someone finds a used boat for $5,000. They think, $5,000, that's a steal for summers on the lake.
But the purchase price is merely the initiation fee to a massive new ecosystem of expenses.
Yep, the multiplier effect is where wealth truly goes to die.
Because you didn't just buy a boat. That boat needs a trailer. The trailer needs a specific type of hitch.
And your current sedan can't safely tow 3,000 pounds, so now what? Now you are suddenly in the market for a truck or a heavy-duty SUV with a towing package.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. You need to pay for marine insurance. You need to pay state registration fees.
You have to pay someone to winterize the engine every single fall.
And you probably have to rent a specialized storage unit for the off-season.
And that is all before something inevitably breaks on the water.
Which it always does. The industry rule of thumb is that annual maintenance costs run about 10% of a boat's total value.
Wow, 10% every year.
So even a modest $30,000 boat is costing you $3,000 every single year just to exist, even if you never put it in the water.
So a purchase that seemed singular, like that $5,000 used boat, is actually an $8,000 to $12,000 ecosystem of ongoing, non-negotiable expenses.
Spot on. Major purchases always multiply into these sprawling ecosystems.
It's the same with anything. If you decide to install a home gym, you aren't just buying weights.
Right. You need specialized rubber flooring so you don't crack your foundation.
You need wall mirrors, storage racks, upgraded ventilation. Sometimes you even have to pay a structural engineer to make sure the joists can handle the load.
Or think about putting in a pool.
Oh, geez. A pool.
You are committing to a lifetime of purchasing specific chemicals, specialized cleaning vacuums, custom winter covers, poolside furniture, and you almost always end up doing entirely new landscaping just to make the area look cohesive.
You are never, ever just buying one thing. You are adopting a lifestyle of related expenses.
That phrasing is perfect. You are adopting an obligation.
I was thinking about how to visualize this mechanism for the listener, and the best analogy I could come up with is that buying a physical item is exactly like adopting a quote-unquote free puppy.
I love this analogy.
Right. Imagine someone stands outside a grocery store and hands you a free puppy. You think, amazing, a free dog. This didn't cost me anything.
But anyone who has ever owned a dog knows the initial acquisition cost is mathematically irrelevant compared to what comes next.
Exactly. Over the next 12 years, you have to buy premium dog food, pay thousands in routine vet bills, buy crates, leashes, toys, and pay for boarding when you travel.
And beyond the financial cost, it requires your daily physical energy and mental attention for over a decade.
Yes. Our homes are essentially filled with financial puppies we didn't mean to adopt, and they are literally eating our bank accounts from the inside out.
The puppy analogy is brilliant because it captures the most insidious of all the hidden costs, the mental energy.
The mental toll is huge.
It really is. Every single item you own occupies a small, distinct slice of your cognitive bandwidth. It needs to be cleaned, organized, maintained, insured, protected, worried about, and eventually it needs to be responsibly disposed of.
And this isn't just an abstract philosophical idea either. There's rigorous science backing up how our environments affect our neurochemistry.
Absolutely. Researchers looking into environmental psychology have found a direct, measurable correlation between the density of objects in our physical spaces and our physiological stress levels.
It actually raises our stress.
Yes. Visual clutter actively increases the production of cortisol, that's the body's primary stress hormone. It also overloads the visual cortex, which measurably reduces the brain's ability to focus and process information.
So our possessions are literally stressing us out in ways our conscious mind doesn't even register.
Exactly. Every time you walk past that crowded spare bedroom we talked about in the first apartment, your brain is forced to process all of that visual noise. And your body responds by triggering a low-grade, persistent stress response.
Wow. So we have the physical storage tax, the cascading multiplier maintenance, and the constant spikes in cortisol.
But there is one more hidden cost we have to talk about, and it might be the most devastating one for long-term financial independence.
Okay, lay on me.
Opportunity cost. This is the mathematical reality that every dollar locked up in a physical possession is a dollar that cannot be invested in your future.
Let's go back to the home gym example to make this concrete.
Great. Let's say you spend $15,000 outfitting a beautiful top-of-the-line garage gym.
A lot of people did that recently.
They did. But that isn't just $15,000 gone today. You have to look at what that money could have been doing for you.
Right.
If you had taken that $15,000 and put it into a broad market index fund, historically, it could have grown to roughly $50,000 over the next 15 years through the power of compound interest.
And this is where the math gets brutal for the listener. You didn't just buy a $15,000 home gym. You bought a home gym instead of having $50,000 of future financial freedom.
Exactly. Every dollar you spend on a depreciating asset is a tiny soldier you are discharging from your wealth-building army.
I mean, that is the ultimate realization. Your living room, your garage, your overflowing closets, they aren't just benign storage spaces holding your stuff.
No, they are landscapes of ongoing, aggressive financial leaks.
When you add up the implicit rent, the maintenance cascades, the mental exhaustion, and the catastrophic loss of investment growth, you realize that many possessions cost significantly more to simply own than they ever cost to buy.
And people who successfully build wealth understand this intuitively. They don't avoid excess possessions because they hate nice things or because they want to live a miserable, ascetic lifestyle.
Right, it's not about punishing themselves.
Not at all. They avoid excess possessions because they've actually run the math. They've calculated the true cost of ownership and concluded that most objects simply aren't worth the burden.
So we have diagnosed the disease, we can clearly see the hidden costs, and we finally understand why so many people feel like they're constantly drowning, even when they earn a fantastic salary.
So the immediate question is, how do we stop the bleeding?
Exactly. Which brings us to step 1 of our 4-step plan. The first line of defense is entirely structural. We have to automate our savings as a fixed, non-negotiable expense.
If we accept the premise that our environment is constantly trying to drain our resources through these hidden costs, the very first proactive step is to protect your income from yourself.
Protect it from yourself. I like that.
You have to secure your future wealth before you ever have the opportunity to adopt another financial puppy. And this relies on a core principle of behavioral economics. Human behavior will reliably, predictably follow the path of least resistance.
We like to think we're these deeply rational creatures who can just budget our way to wealth using sheer discipline.
Oh, we all want to believe that. But willpower is a finite biological resource, and it depletes rapidly throughout the day.
Exactly. Every decision you make at work, every time you negotiate with a toddler, every time you navigate traffic, you are burning through your cognitive reserves.
By 8 o'clock at night, when you are exhausted and scrolling through a beautifully designed online store, your willpower is essentially zero.
And the marketing algorithms know this. They're designed to exploit that exact moment of fatigue.
They absolutely are. If spending money requires zero effort, and saving money requires you to manually log into a banking portal, run calculations, and transfer funds, you will always spend.
Because it's the path of least resistance.
Exactly. You cannot rely on willpower to build wealth. But your environment, the systems you build around yourself, those are constant.
So the guiding principle here is elegantly simple. Create profound ease for saving and create immense friction for spending.
Yes.
What does creating that ease actually look like in practice for someone who wants to start this today?
Creating ease for saving means removing the human element entirely. You set up automatic recurring transfers from your payroll or your primary checking account to route directly into your investment and high-yield savings accounts.
And you do this on the exact day you get paid.
On the exact day. The goal is to have those contributions happen in the background before you even perceive that the money has hit your account.
It's like you never even had it.
Precisely. You have to mentally reclassify your savings. It is no longer whatever happens to be left over at the end of the month. It is a fixed, absolute, mandatory expense, exactly like your rent or your utility bill.
You fund the future first.
Fund the future first, and you only leave a strictly managed, predetermined amount in your easily accessible checking account for daily living.
And the other side of that coin is creating friction for spending. We have to make it genuinely annoying to part with our money.
Genuinely annoying is the goal. You go into every online retailer you use, and you manually delete all of your stored credit card information.
Delete the shopping apps from your phone, too.
Yes. And you ruthlessly unsubscribe from every promotional email list that attempts to manufacture urgency by telling you a sale is ending in 3 hours.
So if you are sitting on your couch at 9 p.m. and you want to buy something, you shouldn't be able to just double-click the side of your phone and use facial recognition to spend $200.
No, you should have to physically get up, find your wallet, type in a 16-digit number, input the expiration date, and wait for shipping.
And that tiny window of physical friction is often all the time your rational brain needs to re-engage, right?
Exactly. It gives you a second to ask, do I actually need this, or am I just tired? By deleting the app, you make an impulsive purchase physically impossible in that vulnerable moment.
Now, I hear this, and I completely agree with the mechanics, but I know what a lot of people listening are thinking right now.
That's it.
They're thinking, what if I automate my savings so aggressively and lock everything away, and then I just genuinely want to buy a new phone?
The phone upgrade.
Yeah, like my current phone is 3 years old, the camera's a little outdated, and I'm just bored of it. Isn't it incredibly restrictive and stressful to deny yourself those little upgrades?
That very common fear, this idea that aggressive saving equals deprivation. But this is where we have to fundamentally redefine what constitutes a true mechanical need versus a culturally manufactured desire.
Okay, unpack that for us.
One of the most destructive habits for high earners is the tendency to upgrade perfectly functional items out of sheer boredom.
Oh, we see this everywhere. The television works perfectly fine, but a new model came out with slightly better black levels, so we replace it.
Right. Or the car runs flawlessly, but the New Year's model has an updated front grille, so we trade it in.
These upgrades feel like natural progress, don't they? They feel like a reward for working hard.
They feel that way, yes. But mathematically, they are wealth destruction disguised as lifestyle improvement. Let's look at the phone example you brought up.
Let's do it.
The average consumer replaces their smartphone every 2 to 3 years. In almost all those cases, the previous phone still makes calls, sends texts, browses the internet, and takes high-quality photos.
It still performs its core function perfectly.
Exactly. If you are spending $1,000 or $1,500 every 2 years to replace a working device, and we extrapolate that habit over a 30-year working career, factoring in the lost compound interest from not investing that money, a lifetime of phone upgrades costs between $30,000 and $50,000.
Over $50,000 in lost wealth just to ensure the camera on the back of your phone has one extra lens that you barely even use.
It's staggering. And when you apply that exact same upgrade culture, across all the categories of your life, replacing functional cars every 4 years, swapping out living room furniture because the trends changed.
Buying the newest laptop when the old one literally just needed a new battery.
Right. When you add all that up, the lifetime wealth destruction easily exceeds $250,000.
So, to address the fear of feeling restricted, automation isn't about punishing yourself. It's a structural mechanism that forces you to pause and define the difference between a true mechanical failure and mere boredom.
Yes, an item remains functional until it genuinely fails to serve its intended purpose. A desire for novelty is not a failure of the object.
Actual mechanical breakdown is a failure.
Exactly. By automating your savings out of your checking account, you remove the excess floating cash that makes impulsive, boredom-driven upgrades so easy to execute.
You aren't locking your money away from genuine emergencies. You are locking it away from a trillion-dollar marketing industry that is relentlessly trying to get you to solve problems you don't actually have.
Perfectly said.
That makes total sense. We secure the perimeter, we ignore the shiny incremental upgrades, but that raises a huge question for step 2.
Okay.
If we are aggressively locking away our money and we are refusing to buy things just because they are new, how do we actually live?
Right. How do we experience life?
Yeah. What if I genuinely want to try something new? Not a new object, but a new experience. Let's say I want to get outdoors more. I want to try kayaking, or I want to learn to play an instrument. How do I explore the world without completely sabotaging this entire system?
This is the perfect pivot to the second step of our plan. We have to test our interests by borrowing and renting before we ever commit to buying.
There's a massive trap here for beginners, isn't there? When we get excited about a new version of ourselves, we end up building what I call a museum of past enthusiasm.
Oh, I think every single person listening to this knows exactly what you mean by that. We all have one, or we know someone who does.
Oh, I have absolutely been guilty of this. You walk into someone's garage and it's like an archaeological dig of abandoned hobbies.
It really is.
You see the dusty, top-tier ski equipment from that one winter. They swore they were going to hit the slopes every single weekend.
Or you look in the closet and find $3,000 worth of professional photography gear sitting in a padded bag from when they thought they were going to become a serious landscape photographer.
Yes. Or there's an acoustic guitar sitting in the corner with rusty strings from the 2 weeks they tried to learn basic chords on YouTube.
The psychology behind the Museum of Past Enthusiasm is incredibly predictable. When humans discover a new potential hobby, we experience a massive surge of dopamine.
It feels good to imagine it.
We project an idealized version of ourselves into the future. We don't just want to try camping. We want to be the rugged, capable outdoorsman.
And the easiest, fastest way to feel like we have achieved that identity is to buy the gear associated with it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Purchasing the equipment feels like progress, even if we haven't acquired any actual skills. But inevitably, the excitement of newness fades.
The reality of the hobby sets in. The cold mornings, the calloused fingers, the steep learning curve.
Right. The initial enthusiasm crashes. And that expensive, highly specialized equipment joins the silent collection of things we own, feel guilty about, and seldom touch.
So how do we circumvent that psychological trap? How do we test our interests without building a shrine to our fleeting attention spans?
You introduce a mandatory buffer period. You rent or borrow the equipment first, every single time, without exception.
Okay, so if you want to get into backcountry camping, you absolutely do not go to a sporting goods store and drop $800 on a high-tech tent, sub-zero sleeping bags, and a titanium camp stove.
No, you rent the equipment for your first 3 trips. If you want to try woodworking, you do not buy a table saw and a router.
You borrow tools from a neighbor, or you buy a month-long pass to a local makerspace.
Exactly. If you think you want to be a kayaker, you rent one by the hour at the local lake.
Now, let me play devil's advocate for a second, because the prevailing financial wisdom we all hear growing up is that renting is a fool's errand. Isn't renting equipment technically throwing money away? If I buy a kayak for $1,000 and use it 3 times, at least I possess a physical liquid asset. If I decide I don't like kayaking, I can just sell it and get my money back. If I rent, I have absolutely nothing to show for my cash.
It instinctively feels that way because we overestimate the resale value of our goods and we vastly underestimate the friction of selling them.
The friction of selling is so real.
It's awful. The math of depreciation tells a very different story. Let's look at that photography example again. You buy a $1,000 camera setup because you want to get into portrait photography.
Right.
The absolute second you break the factory seal on those boxes, that gear loses 20 to 30% of its retail value. It is now used goods.
Instant depreciation.
Let's say you take it out for 3 weekends, realize you actually hate editing photos, and decide to sell it.
Okay, here comes the friction.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
You now have to spend hours taking flattering photos of the gear, writing up detailed online listings, answering messages from strangers, asking if it's still available,
Dealing with lowball offers.
dealing with lowball offers, and eventually meeting someone in a coffee shop parking lot to make the exchange. Best case scenario, you recoup $600.
So you have permanently lost $400 plus several hours of your time, and you had to deal with the stress of the whole transaction.
And we can't forget the mental tax we talked about earlier. Before you finally gathered the energy to sell it, that camera probably sat on your shelf for 6 months, actively mocking you and making you feel guilty for abandoning your creative pursuits.
Oh, that guilt is heavy. Contrast that entire exhausting ordeal with simply renting a professional camera body and a good lens for 2 weekends for $150.
Right. You spend $150, you learn definitively that the hobby doesn't fit your lifestyle, and you hand the gear back to the rental shop in a prepaid shipping box.
No lingering guilt, no long-term storage costs, no haggling with strangers online.
You saved $250 up front, and you kept your living space entirely clear. Renting acts as a highly effective, deeply discounted litmus test to determine if your enthusiasm is genuine or temporary.
It fundamentally changes how you view the expense.
Yeah.
You aren't throwing money away on a rental. You are paying cheap tuition to learn vital information about your own preferences.
And it serves another equally crucial function. It clarifies exactly what your functional needs are.
How so?
Well, first-time buyers in any hobby almost always guess wrong. They lack the experience to know what matters. They buy way too much gear, or they buy highly specialized equipment they don't actually have the skills to use.
Renting allows you to learn the mechanics of the hobby before committing capital.
Exactly. When you do eventually cross the threshold and decide this is a permanent part of your life, you will buy precisely what is necessary, rather than just guessing based on a YouTube review.
The flexibility to explore the world without the immediate burden of physical ownership is just mathematically and psychologically superior in every way.
It really is.
Okay, so let's look at where we are. By automating our savings in step 1, we've stopped the bleeding. By forcing ourselves to rent our hobbies in step 2, we keep our money liquid and we keep our garages empty.
Yay.
But this brings us to step 3, which is a massive philosophical crossroads. What is the ultimate purpose of keeping all this money liquid? Why are we saving it so aggressively in the first place?
It's the big question.
If the goal of human life isn't to accumulate the biggest, nicest pile of physical stuff, what exactly are we aiming for?
This requires a total redefinition of wealth. We have to transition away from prioritizing physical accumulation and start prioritizing personal optionality.
Redefining wealth. Because the conventional view, the one pushed by every billboard and TV commercial, measures wealth entirely by what you have.
Yes, we measure it by the square footage of the house, the badge on the hood of the car, the designer logos on the clothing. We view wealth as a collection of visible markers of success.
But those visible markers are often illusions, aren't they?
Almost always. True financial stability, the kind of wealth that actually lets you sleep soundly at night, measures wealth by what you can choose.
Optionality.
Optionality. It's the ability to make major life decisions based on your personal preferences and your well-being, rather than being dictated to by financial necessity.
Let's ground this for the listener. Give me some concrete, real-world examples of what high optionality actually looks like in practice.
Optionality is the ability to walk into your manager's office on a Tuesday and quit a toxic, soul-crushing job that is destroying your mental health without a moment of panic.
Because you have 18 months of living expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account.
Exactly. Optionality is the ability to take 6 months completely off work to care for a sick parent or to support a child through a medical emergency without going into debt.
It's the freedom to abruptly move across the country for a new relationship.
Yes, or the runway to start your own business and go a year without a guaranteed salary. It is the ability to retire at 52 instead of 67.
These options, these abilities to pivot your life on your own terms, represent true, profound wealth.
They absolutely do.
This circles all the way back to our 2 apartments from the introduction. The person earning $200,000 a year, but who has built a lifestyle that costs $195,000 a year to maintain, has zero optionality.
Zero. They might look incredibly wealthy to their neighbors, but structurally, they are terrified.
They are wearing golden handcuffs. They cannot afford to take a pay cut for a more fulfilling job. They cannot afford to take a sabbatical. They cannot afford a single gap in employment.
Because the massive machine of their lifestyle requires constant heavy fuel just to keep the lights on.
The high earner in that scenario is just a highly paid, indentured servant to their own possessions.
Precisely. But the person earning $80,000 a year who has deliberately engineered a lifestyle that only costs $45,000 a year, they possess extraordinary world-bending wealth.
They have wide margins. They can absorb catastrophic economic disruptions. They can take massive career risks.
They aren't chained to an income requirement. But to achieve that kind of sweeping optionality, you have to do something that modern society strongly discourages.
What's that?
You have to define the concept of enough before you start earning more money.
Defining enough. Man, this feels like the absolute secret sauce to the whole philosophy. How do we actually do that when everything around us is telling us we need more?
It requires setting clear, intentional, permanent lifestyle limits. Most high earners fall into a very predictable trap. They never sit down and define what enough looks like.
They never draw a finish line.
Because they have no finish line, they just keep purchasing more, continually seeking a satisfaction that never arrives.
As their income increases through promotions and investments, they automatically upgrade their lifestyle to match the new cash flow.
They move from the starter home to the luxury home. They trade the Honda for the BMW. This new, expensive lifestyle quickly normalizes and becomes their new baseline.
And within 6 months, they feel just as stretched as they did before, so they feel they need another raise to make real progress. It's an endless, exhausting treadmill.
The data shows that people earning $300,000 frequently report feeling just as financially stressed as people earning $80,000.
And that's entirely because their material expectations expanded perfectly alongside their income.
Exactly.
Lifestyle creep is so deeply insidious because it doesn't happen all at once, it sneaks up on you. It's the slightly nicer wine at dinner, the upgraded hotel room, the premium cable package. Before you know it, your baseline survival number has doubled.
To break that cycle, you have to preemptively decide what level of material comfort constitutes genuine, lasting satisfaction for you.
You have to look at your life and say, a reliable $30,000 car is enough for me. It gets me from point A to point B safely and comfortably. I will never need a $100,000 car.
Right. You decide, a $350,000 house in a safe neighborhood is enough space for my family. I don't need a sprawling estate.
If you draw those firm lines in the sand, a truly magical mathematical event occurs when your income inevitably grows.
It really is magic. If you cap your lifestyle requirements at $60,000 a year, and through hard work your income jumps to $150,000, that massive $90,000 gap doesn't go toward a nicer car or a slightly larger kitchen island.
It goes straight into investments. It goes straight to buying your freedom.
Without a clearly defined finish line, your lifestyle expansion will always, mathematically, outpace your income growth.
I want to reframe this for the listener, because when you really internalize this, it changes every interaction you have with money. Every time you are browsing online and you click that buy now button for a gadget or a piece of clothing you don't truly need, you aren't just trading $50 for an object.
No, you're trading much more than that.
You are literally trading your future choices for a physical possession. The thousands of dollars tied up in a luxury vehicle you don't actually need is money that cannot buy your freedom when your company downsizes or your health requires you to step back.
That is the exact framing required.
Every unnecessary purchase is you voluntarily buying a tiny lock to secure your own golden handcuffs.
Each purchase is a direct trade of optionality for physical possession. Is the third television in the guest bedroom worth reducing your ability to make free choices about your future?
When you view it through the lens of optionality, the answer is almost universally no.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so we have the underlying philosophy firmly established. We see the hidden costs and the ecosystems of expenses. We've built structural automation to save our money. We understand the power of renting to avoid the museum of past enthusiasm. And we are laser focused on buying optionality instead of accumulating more things.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have, but let's be entirely realistic here. We still have to wake up every day and live in a highly sophisticated, hyper-targeted, deeply consumer-driven world.
Yes, we do.
We are bombarded with thousands of perfectly engineered advertisements every single day, specifically designed by behavioral psychologists to make us feel inadequate without their product. How do we survive the daily grinding temptations?
That brings us to step 4, the final phase of the strategy. We have to actively break the cycles of impulsive consumption habits.
Step 4, let's do this.
This step is entirely about daily maintenance. It's about building tactical friction to short-circuit the psychological loops of impulse buying that constantly threaten to unravel the first 3 steps.
One of the most practical tools for this is the 24-hour waiting rule. It sounds incredibly simple, but it is devastatingly effective.
It is arguably the single most effective friction point you can introduce into your daily life. The rule is absolute. You implement a mandatory, non-negotiable 24-hour waiting period for any non-essential purchase.
So if you are walking through a store or browsing online and you see something you immediately desire, you are allowed to acknowledge the desire, right?
Yes, you can put it in your digital shopping cart, or you can write it down.
Right.
But you are strictly forbidden from completing the financial transaction for 1 full day.
And the behavioral data on this simple pause is just wild. Implementing a 24-hour wait eliminates roughly 70% of all impulse buys.
70%.
Yeah.
The reason it works is rooted in how human emotion functions. Most intense desires for physical objects are incredibly fleeting.
They're sparked by an acute emotional trigger, aren't they?
Exactly. Maybe you had a stressful meeting at work, maybe you were bored on a Sunday afternoon, or maybe you just saw a brilliantly designed advertisement that tapped into your aspirational self.
In that moment, the desire feels urgent and permanent.
But emotion has a very short half-life. If you force a 24-hour gap between the stimulus and the response, the emotional spike dissipates. The manufactured urgency evaporates.
You wake up the next morning, your baseline neurochemistry is leveled out, and you realize you don't actually care about the item at all. You just wanted the momentary dopamine hit of the transaction.
It's like breaking a hypnotic spell.
You wake up the next day and think, why on earth did I almost spend $200 on a specialized pizza oven?
Exactly.
Okay, so the waiting rule handles the immediate emotional spikes. What's the next tactical tool in step 4?
The next tool is mathematical. You must learn to calculate the cost per use.
Cost per use.
This is an analytical weapon designed to destroy the illusions created by marketing departments. Before you purchase anything, you force yourself to estimate exactly how many times you will realistically use the item over its lifespan, and then you divide the total purchase price by that number.
And that resulting figure is your true cost per use, and it's really the only honest metric of an item's value.
Yeah.
Let's run through some concrete examples of this because it completely inverts how we socially define expensive versus cheap.
Okay, let's say you see a very trendy, highly stylized jacket for $200. It feels somewhat affordable. But because it's a very specific statement piece, you only wear it to 2 holiday parties, and then it sits in the back of your closet because it goes out of style. That affordable jacket actually costs you $100 per wear.
Which is incredibly expensive.
Yes. Now, let's say you invest in a classic, incredibly high-quality winter coat for $400. The receipt price is twice as high, which feels expensive.
$400 hurts a bit more at the register.
It does. But because it's durable and timeless, you wear it every single day for the cold months, let's say 200 times over 3 or 4 years. That $400 jacket costs you $2 per wear.
So the jacket that was twice as expensive at the cash register is actually vastly cheaper in any meaningful economic sense.
Precisely.
This calculation absolutely shreds the logic of cheap impulse buying. Think about the kitchen, that specialized $300 stand mixer that you use twice a year to make holiday cookies.
That's costing you $150 every time you turn it on.
Meanwhile, a $2,000 premium mattress that you sleep on every single night for 10 years, that costs about 55 cents per use.
Cost per use cuts through the societal pressure of the price tag and reveals what objects actually deliver value and impact to your daily quality of life.
It forces you to invest in things you use daily and ruthlessly cut things you use rarely.
Right. Now, once you master the incoming flow of purchases using the waiting rule and cost per use, you have to deal with the backlog.
Oh, the stuff we already own.
Yes, you have to address the thousands of items you already have. This is where we employ the replacement test.
I find this test so powerful. Walk me through exactly how it works.
You literally walk through your home, room by room, and look at the items you possess. For each object, you ask yourself one brutal, intellectually honest question.
Which is?
If this item disappeared today, if it was stolen, lost in a fire, or vanished into thin air, would I immediately take my own money and go back to the store to buy it again?
Ouch. That is deeply confronting.
It forces total honesty. Would you actually log online and repurchase that massive fondue set, taking up an entire cabinet?
Probably not.
Would you buy that bread maker that's been collecting dust since 2020? Would you go back to the mall and repurchase the uncomfortable shoes you haven't worn in a year and a half?
For the vast, overwhelming majority of items in our homes, the honest answer is a resounding no.
And if the answer is no, if you wouldn't buy them again, why are you keeping them?
We keep them because of inertia, not intention.
Exactly. They were impulsive mistakes or gifts from relatives we felt obligated to keep or remnants from that museum of past enthusiasm we discussed earlier.
But keeping them is not a neutral act. They have a negative value.
They are actively costing you spatial rent, they are cluttering your visual field, and they are draining your mental energy without providing any corresponding benefit to your life.
People who master their finances and their environments ruthlessly eliminate items that fail the replacement test.
They really do.
Which leads us to a practice that I know causes a lot of friction for beginners. It's the idea of counting your possessions to establish maximum thresholds.
Yes, taking an actual inventory of specific categories of your life.
I have to push back hard on this one because, honestly, telling a listener to go into their kitchen and count their spatulas or open their dresser and count exactly how many black t-shirts they own, it sounds obsessive.
I get that a lot.
It borders on neurotic. Doesn't turning your own home into a meticulous inventory spreadsheet take all the spontaneity and joy out of life?
It sounds incredibly tedious and overly rigid until you actually perform the exercise, and then you realize the profound psychological shift it creates. It's absolutely not about maintaining a perpetual spreadsheet of spatulas for the rest of your life.
Okay, good. So what is the point of it then?
The act of counting is a one-time shock to the system, and it is explicitly designed to shatter a very specific illusion.
What illusion is that?
The illusion of scarcity that constantly drives our consumption. Our brains evolved in environments of profound scarcity. Accumulating resources kept us alive.
Right, our caveman brains.
Exactly. We
Yeah.
still have that hardware running in the modern world. If I stop an average person and ask them how many t-shirts they own, they almost always guess low. They'll say, I don't know, maybe 12 or 15.
They feel a subtle sense of scarcity.
But when they actually pull every single shirt out of the closet, the laundry basket, and the storage bins and physically count them, they discover they own 45.
And the shock of confronting that objective number instantly changes behavior.
Once you are consciously, factually aware that you already own 45 shirts, your entire perspective shifts. You are no longer just picking up a cute new shirt at the store. You are actively choosing to bring your collection to 46.
The absurdity of the accumulation becomes intensely visible.
Exactly. It's not about the number itself. It's about forcing a moment of absolute awareness.
Awareness is the antidote to mindless accumulation. Once you know the baseline numbers, you can easily set a rational threshold.
Yes, you can say, based on my laundry schedule, I realistically only need 30 items of clothing.
If you hit that threshold and you still want something new, you have to implement a one-in, one-out policy.
If you buy a new sweater, an old sweater must be donated or sold. That friction alone dramatically reduces acquisition, because every single addition now requires a conscious, sometimes painful decision about what it is replacing.
And this philosophy ties directly into how we should manage decluttering, doesn't it? Because we are culturally obsessed with these massive, exhausting annual purges where we tear apart the whole house in a weekend frenzy, throw 20 trash bags on the curb, and declare ourselves minimalists.
Yes, and the massive annual purge is almost always a failure in the long term.
Why is that?
You feel an incredible high for a few weeks because the visual clutter is gone. But because you haven't actually changed the underlying habits of acquisition, because you haven't implemented the weighting rules or the cost per use math, the gradual reaccumulation happens silently and unnoticed.
2 years later, the closets are bursting again, and you are right back where you started.
Instead of the purge, the sustainable approach is cyclical decluttering. You implement small, manageable weekly reviews.
Removing 3 unused items from your home every Sunday is infinitely more sustainable than a chaotic weekend teardown.
It catches accumulation early, before it cascades, and more importantly, it maintains your ongoing awareness of your emotional triggers.
Let's go deeper on that phrase, emotional triggers, because this brings us to the very bedrock of why we do this. Why do people trapped in this consumer cycle buy so much in the first place?
This is where we dive into the deep, often uncomfortable psychology of consumption. We have to ask what the spending is actually accomplishing for the individual.
Okay, so what is it doing for them?
Very often, impulsive spending is a misguided attempt to temporarily fill an emotional void or soothe an anxiety that is, ironically, created by financial insecurity in the first place.
Wait, say that again because that is massive. You are saying people are spending money to fix the painful feeling of not having enough money.
It is a vicious, highly destructive psychological loop. Imagine you are spending nearly everything you earn just to maintain your lifestyle. Subconsciously, you know you are on a tightrope.
Right, which is stressful.
This creates a deep internal sense of insecurity and stress. To get temporary emotional relief from that baseline stress, to feel a momentary sense of control or to signal your status to others, you go out and buy something.
A new watch, a nice dinner, a gadget.
For a few hours, the dopamine hits, and you feel successful. You feel in control.
But then the credit card bill arrives.
Exactly. That spending has actively deepened your structural financial insecurity, which in turn increases your baseline stress, which drives an even stronger need for emotional relief, which drives more spending.
The cycle feeds on itself and accelerates until some external shock, a job loss, a medical bill, a recession, forces a catastrophic breaking point.
It's a closed loop of anxiety and consumption.
But the absolute beauty of this entire four-step approach is that it outlines a bidirectional virtuous cycle as well, doesn't it?
It does, and this is the most empowering part of the whole philosophy. It is true that owning less physical stuff creates more money in your bank account.
Yeah.
But the profound realization is that having more money actually makes owning less stuff feel completely natural and effortless.
Wow.
When your bank account is robust, when you know you have 18 months of runway, when you see your investments compounding, the psychological desperate need to accumulate diminishes entirely.
Because the human need for security and status gets satisfied by actual mathematical financial strength, rather than by displaying physical possessions.
You don't need to lease a luxury car or wear a designer watch to feel successful because your bank account already tells you the story you want to hear.
Your security is internally verified by your ledger. It no longer needs to be externally displayed to your neighbors.
That's it, exactly.
That is profound. If you address the root insecurity through actual structural financial strength, the compulsion to spend just organically dissolves on its own. It's not a battle of willpower anymore.
The choice between those two cycles, the vicious loop of consumption and the virtuous cycle of saving and security, determines your financial trajectory far more than your gross salary ever could.
Modest earners who ride the virtuous cycle slowly but inevitably build everything. High earners trapped in the destructive cycle frantically build nothing.
Couldn't have said it better.
Let's bring all of this together. We've covered a massive amount of ground in this deep dive today, unearthing the psychology and the mathematics of how we live.
We really have.
So let's synthesize this beginner strategy, not just as a numbered list, but as a cohesive, holistic way to start taking back control of your life today.
Sounds good.
First, you have to stop the bleeding by recognizing the massive hidden ecosystems of costs attached to everything you own. You secure your perimeter by automating your savings as a fixed mandatory expense. You must build environmental systems that make good financial decisions automatic because your daily willpower will eventually fail you.
Right.
Second, you protect that newly saved money by aggressively testing your interests. You refuse to build a museum of past enthusiasm. You borrow and rent to learn exactly what you actually need, effectively paying cheap tuition before you ever commit to buying.
Exactly.
Third, you aim your life toward the right goal. You completely redefine wealth as personal optionality and freedom of choice rather than the physical accumulation of objects. You do the hard work of defining your enough so that when your income inevitably grows, your freedom expands, not just your lifestyle requirements.
Yep.
And finally, step 4, you maintain this entire system by intentionally breaking the impulsive cycles of consumption. You force a 24-hour pause, you rigorously calculate the cost per use, you subject your belongings to the replacement test, and you embrace the sudden clarity that comes from understanding exactly how much you already have.
And as you implement these changes, remember the core truth. This approach has never been about restriction or punishment or deprivation.
Not at all.
It is simply about looking clearly at the math and the psychology of modern life and arriving at the rational conclusion that most physical things are simply not worth their hidden costs. People who embrace this mindset spend exactly enough to be deeply, genuinely comfortable, and they ruthlessly redirect every remaining dollar toward their life, toward their freedom, and toward their absolute peace of mind.
Now, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you look around your own living room today.
Let's hear it.
We spent this entire deep dive talking about personal finance. We focused on your individual choices, your specific closets, and your personal bank accounts. But I want you to zoom out for a second.
Okay.
Think about the sheer staggering scale of the economy we live in. What if our entire modern, hyper-fast, perpetually growing economy actually relies on you failing to realize these hidden costs?
Oh, that's a big question.
Right. What if the constant aggressive push for phone upgrades, the total normalization of the lifestyle multiplier effect, the cultural stigmatization of renting, what if all of that is not an accident?
It's definitely by design.
What if it is a required, perfectly engineered feature of a massive societal system that fundamentally needs you to be broke, stressed, and hungry so you keep working longer hours and keep buying more things?
Wow.
By applying this philosophy, you aren't just optimizing your budget or saving a few dollars. You might be quietly, radically opting out of an entire societal machine designed to keep you exhausted and dependent. What actually happens to the world when enough of us wake up and actively choose freedom over furniture?
That is something to think about.
Think back to those two apartments at the very beginning of this journey. The person chained to the $4,000 leather couch, surrounded by boxes, terrified of missing a single paycheck, and the person sitting on the modest sofa, breathing easily, with 18 months of total freedom in the bank. Which apartment do you want to live in? The math is clear, the path is laid out, and the choice is entirely yours. Usually when we talk about like a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of total precision.
Right. It's very clinical.
Exactly. It feels like engineering. Like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, the doctor points right to the fracture, and there's just absolute certainty in the room.
It's completely binary.
Yeah.
Like the bone is broken or it isn't. And I think the human mind just gravitates toward that kind of visible, categorized certainty.
Because it makes the world feel manageable, right?
Yeah. We want to see the problem.
But then you step into the world of building lasting wealth, and suddenly that x-ray machine is, well, it's utterly useless. We're looking at a financial landscape that is just incredibly murky.
Oh, completely opaque for those people.
Right. And people walk around every day thinking they can, spot wealth a mile away. We think the guy driving the brand new luxury SUV has it all figured out, and the person taking the bus is struggling.
Which is such a massive misconception.
It really is. So, what if the true markers of financial success, the actual load-bearing walls of a secure life, are entirely invisible to the naked eye? Welcome to today's deep dive.
I love this framing because it changes everything.
Yeah, and our mission today is charting out a clear, completely jargon-free path for anyone starting from absolute zero, like zero financial literacy, zero savings. We want to guide you on your journey toward building lasting wealth.
Moving from that place of financial confusion where you're just sort of reacting to everything life throws at you.
Exactly. Reacting to every bill and every emergency to a state of actual strategic mastery. And our anchor for this conversation is this fascinating framework from the YouTube channel Wealth Mindset 99.
It's such a brilliant breakdown. It completely strips away the complex market analysis.
And the flashy guru advice, right? Like the stuff we're all so tired of hearing.
Yeah, exactly. It grounds the entire conversation in behavioral economics. I mean, it ignores all those macroeconomic trends that we just cannot control anyway.
Which is a relief, honestly.
Right. And it focuses entirely on the micro decisions, that daily psychological posture that actually constructs a financial foundation over decades.
And it does this by introducing a story that fundamentally challenges how we perceive wealth. It's the story of a woman named Miss Anne.
Oh, the Miss Anne's story is just incredible.
It's crazy. So picture a retired tax auditor living in a rent-controlled apartment in New York City. She lived in the exact same building on the same street for decades.
Very standard, very routine.
Yeah, and she wore this remarkably unremarkable small gray coat every single season. Winter, spring, it just didn't matter. She was, for all intents and purposes, completely invisible.
Just a ghost in the machinery of the city.
A ghost, exactly. You'd hold the elevator for her. She offers a polite nod, and that is the absolute ceiling of your interaction.
Which, when you think about it, is a very specific type of camouflage.
Right, camouflage.
Well,
now contrast her camouflage with a guy living right down the hall in that exact same building. This guy was the complete opposite of a ghost.
the loudest guy in the room.
Oh, everyone in the building just knew he had money. He drove a leased car that probably cost more than most people's annual rent.
Naturally.
He wore this watch that caught the light just right, and he was perpetually holding court in the lobby, right? With some loud story about a big financial win.
And the really crucial observation here is that every time he talked, people implicitly believed him.
Right, because our brains are basically hardwired to respond to those visible signals.
Exactly. The guy who talks loudly about money, who displays all the physical totems of success that registers to our primate brains as the alpha, the one with all the resources.
We just constantly conflate the performance of success with the reality of security.
We really do. We see the watch, we hear the stories, and we automatically assume the bank account matches the volume of the broadcast. I mean, it's an evolutionary shortcut.
Like in nature, right.
Right. In nature, a loud display often signifies actual power or toxicity. You know, think of peacock's feathers or those bright colors on a poisonous frog.
Oh, that's a great point.
But in modern financial ecosystems, conspicuous consumption is very often just a sophisticated masking of extreme vulnerability.
Which brings us to the profound twist in this whole story. When Miss Anne passed away, it was revealed that she left behind $22 million.
22 million. It's staggering.
It's insane, and not from a lottery ticket, not from a secret inheritance, and definitely not hidden in some, cinematic offshore account.
She just steadily, quietly accumulated it.
Yeah, and the real shockwave wasn't even just the sheer velocity of that number. It was that absolutely nobody in her building, not even the people who saw her every single day, would have guessed she even had $100,000 to her name.
This introduces the most vital concept for anyone listening who is trying to build wealth from zero: the framework of the second ledger.
Second ledger. Let's really get into this.
Yeah, because the source material argues that her millions weren't built in these dramatic cinematic moments. They were hidden in 50 years of completely ordinary Tuesdays.
Right, so let's break down this ledger concept because it shifts the entire paradigm. The first ledger is the obvious one.
It's your bank account.
Exactly. It's the number you stare at on your banking app at 2 in the morning when you're stressed and you can't sleep. It's the public, or at least the visible, manifestation of your resources.
It's the thing everyone fixates on.
But the first ledger is just the outcome.
Right, it's the outcome, but the second ledger is the engine. And this one isn't audited by the IRS. It doesn't generate a monthly PDF statement, and there's no shiny app for it.
So what actually is it?
The second ledger is comprised entirely of what you do when absolutely nobody is watching you. It tracks your discipline, your restraint, and all your quiet habits.
There is a line in the source material that just perfectly encapsulates this. It says, "Money is usually the receipt, behavior was the purchase."
That quote is just incredible.
It completely inverts how society teaches us about money, because we are taught that wealth is the catalyst for behavior change, right?
Right, we tell ourselves, well, once I have money, I'll stop stressing, I'll plan better, I'll act like a real investor.
Exactly. But this framework insists the behavior has to come first. It has to happen in the dark, in the quiet, when you have absolutely nothing to show for it.
Because wealth compounds in your identity long before it ever compounds in your investment portfolio.
I love that. So Miss Anne's first ledger, her checking account, her modest paycheck as a civil servant, that undoubtedly looked incredibly unimpressive for the vast majority of her life.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't something you would ever bring up at a dinner party to try and impress people.
But her second ledger was an absolute masterpiece. It was pristine, just filled with thousands of quiet, disciplined entries made over 50 years.
And so if that invisible second ledger is where the actual construction happens, the immediate question for someone starting out today is, well, what exactly are we supposed to be writing in it?
Right, and perhaps even more importantly, what behaviors are we currently engaging in that are actively bankrupting that hidden ledger?
Which leads perfectly into how the source explores the very act of talking about our money, how that can sabotage our progress.
The urge to broadcast our financial wins is just incredibly powerful, isn't it?
It's deeply ingrained. The creator of this framework shares this highly relatable observation about a friend from his 20s.
Oh, the loud buddy.
Right. This is a hardworking guy, genuinely trying to get ahead in life. But every single time he experienced a financial positive, an end-of-year bonus, a stock going up, a side hustle paying off, he had to announce it.
To his entire social circle. We all know this person.
Completely.
And honestly, most of us have probably been this person at some point. But the fascinating part of the observation was how the friend told the stories.
They changed every time, right?
Yeah, the details would morph and expand just slightly with each retelling. The storytelling itself became the primary objective, not the underlying financial reality.
He was extracting a chemical reward. Dopamine, social validation right from the faces of the people listening to him.
He was spending the feeling of wealth before he had actually secured the wealth itself.
It's a literal form of premature cognitive closure.
Wait, unpack that term. Premature cognitive closure.
Yeah. So by getting the external validation, your brain registers the task as complete or successful. And that immediately diminishes the internal drive required to actually maintain or grow that wealth.
Wow, so you're tricking your brain into thinking you crossed the finish line?
Exactly. You are cashing in the psychological momentum for a fleeting moment of social applause.
It totally reminds me of shaking up a bottle of carbonated water.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. All that pressure, all that trapped carbonation, that represents your internal financial momentum and your drive.
Okay, I see where this is going.
If you keep the cap on, that pressure stays contained. It can propel you forward. But the second you twist the cap and open it to show off the fizz to everyone in the room, the fizz just evaporates into the air.
It's gone instantly.
You get that loud psh sound, people look over, you get your moment of attention, but then you are just holding a bottle of flat water. The kinetic energy is completely gone.
That captures the physics of it perfectly. You are venting the energy of your success into the atmosphere rather than using it to fuel your next strategic move.
And beyond just the internal psychological drain, there is a massive external consequence to broadcasting your wins, right? It fundamentally alters your social ecosystem.
It really does. When you remain silent about your growing resources, you are executing a masterclass in boundary management.
That makes total sense from a boundary perspective. If no one knows you have a surplus, you never have to deal with the subtle or sometimes very aggressive social pressure of being the rich friend.
Right. No one is factoring your bank account into their own emergency plan.
Exactly. You aren't expected to pick up the tab at every group dinner, and your relationships don't warp into these weird transactional dynamics.
You're protecting your environment from the corrupting influence of expectation. When people know you have excess capital, the power dynamics of your relationships shift entirely.
Even with good friends.
Even well-meaning friends and family members will inadvertently begin to view you through the lens of a potential resource.
That is so true, and it's kind of tragic.
It is. But by maintaining absolute silence, you preserve the authenticity of your connections. You get to keep moving forward undisturbed without having to manage the resentment or expectations of the people around you.
Miss Anne didn't vent her energy, and she didn't invite transactional relationships. She kept the cap on for 50 years.
Every single time she experienced a win and chose not to announce it, she was making a massive deposit into her second ledger.
But I have to push back a little here, because keeping your head down and staying invisible presents a very real problem for the beginner.
Also,
Well, we know that upward mobility, finding better jobs, discovering new opportunities, these things almost always come from other people. They come from networks.
true.
So if you are operating in total silence to protect your boundaries, how do you proactively build the relationships you need to actually grow your income? You can't just be a hermit.
Right, and this requires a nuanced shift in how we understand connection. The framework addresses this by redefining the concept of networking entirely.
Stripping away the transactional nature we usually associate with that word.
Exactly. The source points out a phenomenon we've all witnessed. There is always that one person who seems to effortlessly know about the best opportunities before anyone else.
Yes. The person who gets tipped off about an internal promotion before human resources even drafts the job description.
Or they know the absolute best contractor who works for half the market rate.
And from the outside, it just looks like they are incredibly unfairly lucky.
But luck is a misdiagnosis here. What we're actually observing is the delayed payout of perfect timing.
But not the kind of timing where you rush into a room exactly when an opportunity is announced.
No, it is the timing of having established a presence long before the opportunity ever even existed.
Because the way most of us operate, and I definitely include myself in this when I was younger, is through panic networking.
Oh, panic networking is the worst.
It is. We completely ignore our professional and social circles until we are in a state of acute crisis. The moment we get laid off or the car transmission explodes and we need cash fast, suddenly we're on LinkedIn sending out 50 messages.
Or texting old acquaintances asking if they want to, quote-unquote, grab a coffee and catch up.
Yeah, and human beings possess an incredibly sensitive threat detection system for that exact behavior.
And we really do. We can smell the desperation a mile away. And more importantly, we recognize the inherent selfishness of the outreach.
Right. Nobody wants to build a foundational relationship with someone who is only standing in front of them because they need a parachute. The transactional volume is just deafening.
So the people who actually get the unposted job offers, They're doing something completely different. The framework highlights that their strategy doesn't even look like a strategy.
It looks like random noise to the untrained eye.
Exactly. It looks like sending a text on a random Thursday that just says, hey, read this article on architectural design and remember that conversation we had last year. Thought you'd enjoy it.
With absolutely no ask attached.
Zero ask.
Hmm?
Or it's taking 10 minutes to grab a coffee with a colleague from a totally different department and asking them about their kid's soccer tournament without ever bringing the conversation back to work or favors.
To someone who is obsessed with immediate efficiency, those interactions appear incredibly wasteful.
But in the reality of the second ledger, they are foundational structural investments. You are making deposits into an account that doesn't yield financial interest.
It yields trust capital, and it yields asymmetric information flow.
I like to think of it as the difference between dedicating 10 years to planting and cultivating an orchard versus running to the grocery store screaming because you are starving for an apple right now.
You cannot rush the cultivation of trust.
No, you really can't. You can't force a tree to drop fruit into your hands today just because you failed to plant the seeds a decade ago.
You have to plant the seeds when you have absolutely zero appetite for apples.
When you consistently show up in people's lives with zero ulterior motives, you establish yourself as a safe entity.
You prove that you value the individual above their utility to you.
Exactly. So when an opportunity eventually materializes in their world, their brain naturally routes that information to the safe entity.
You don't get the call because you cornered them and demanded a favor.
You get the call because your reliability and your genuine interest earned you the right to be top of mind.
But here's the thing, planting that orchard of trust requires a surplus of time and mental energy, and this forces us to look at where our daily energy is actually going.
Which is usually into all the wrong places.
Right. If you are exhausted from micromanaging the wrong parts of your financial life, you simply won't have the cognitive bandwidth to send those thoughtful texts or grab those low-stakes coffees.
Are we actually being strategic with our energy, or are we just distracting ourselves by being quote-unquote busy?
This distinction between busy and strategic is arguably the most dangerous trap for anyone starting from zero.
Because society actively encourages and praises financial busyness. It looks like hard work.
But activity is not achievement. The source provides this incredibly visceral anecdote about a guy who spent 40 minutes hunting through websites and old emails just to find a coupon that would save him $8 on a purchase.
40 minutes of intense, focused effort for an $8 return.
Right. But that exact same individual who possessed the discipline to hunt down that discount never once dedicated 40 minutes to researching how a specific professional certification could permanently elevate his salary baseline.
He never calculated the 20-year return on investment for his own career development.
This is a classic manifestation of what behavioral economists call tunneling.
Tunneling, exactly. When you are financially stressed, your vision narrows to the most immediate, tangible problems in front of you.
Hunting for the coupon provides a dopamine hit of immediate victory.
It gives you a highly localized, but ultimately false sense of control over your financial destiny.
I need to push back on this quite strongly, though, just on behalf of the person listening to this who literally has $12 in their checking account right now.
Okay, let's hear it.
When you are standing in the grocery aisle trying to figure out how to feed your family until Friday, that $8 coupon isn't a false sense of control. It is the literal difference between eating and not eating.
That is a very valid point.
We can't just tell someone in poverty to stop clipping coupons and go study for their CPA exams. Cognitive bandwidth doesn't pay this month's electric bill.
You are touching on one of the most critical realities of financial psychology here. It's deeply explored in research on the scarcity mindset.
Right, because poverty changes how you think.
It literally does.
Okay.
Studies demonstrate that acute financial stress actually taxes your cognitive capacity, temporarily dropping your effective IQ by several points.
Wow, really?
Yes. When you are drowning, you cannot be expected to study hydrodynamics. You just need a life preserver. If you are in a state of acute emergency, survival mechanics like extreme couponing are absolutely necessary.
Exactly. When you are in the tunnel of poverty, the periphery simply doesn't exist. You only see the immediate threat.
However, the trap the framework is warning against is allowing those survival mechanics to calcify into your permanent identity.
Okay. So it's about what happens next.
Right. The tragedy occurs when someone eventually gets a slightly better job or gains a tiny bit of breathing room. but they continue operating as if they are in a perpetual emergency.
Oh, I see.
If you spend all your mental energy agonizing over an $8 difference on a grocery bill when you no longer strictly have to, you literally exhaust the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning.
You are trading your future earning potential, your ability to think strategically about a career pivot, for a tiny, immediate discount.
Exactly. So it's about recognizing when the emergency is over and intentionally shifting gears.
The source talks about what being strategic actually looks like. It's not about knowing the price per ounce of every brand of peanut butter in the store,
It's about knowing the macro math.
the macro math. It's about figuring out the one overarching number. What does your life actually cost to run?
The author admits to a period in his life where he could recite his exact frustration over a minor utility bill, but he had absolutely no idea what his macro survival number was.
People actively avoid the macro math because sitting down to calculate your actual cost of living, projecting your current trajectory over a decade, that is terrifying.
It strips away all the comforting illusions we build up.
It forces you to confront reality, and confronting reality requires a specific kind of daily discipline.
But the problem is, when people finally decide they want to improve their financial lives, when they want to act rich and step up to the next level, they usually observe and copy the exact wrong behaviors.
We look at the first ledger behaviors of those around us, the spending, the displaying, and we assume that is the pathway.
We try to copy the lifestyle instead of copying the invisible discipline that actually funded the lifestyle.
There is a brilliant story in the source material that illustrates this perfectly. It's about a team of coworkers celebrating the closing of a massive corporate contract.
This is such a common scenario.
Right. Everyone goes out, the adrenaline is super high, and the team is ordering rounds of expensive drinks and throwing their credit cards down like money is suddenly infinite.
Just burning cash.
But one coworker quietly orders a single drink, splits a modest appetizer, and heads home before the tab reaches astronomical levels.
And predictably, in that heightened social environment, someone mocked her for being cheap.
But the narrator realized she wasn't cheap at all. She just wasn't participating in the performance of relief.
The performance of release, that is a psychologically profound concept right there.
Tell me more about that.
Well, when people experience a windfall or even just a temporary reduction in stress, they feel this biological urge to physically manifest that relief.
They want to buy something.
Exactly. They want to buy something to prove to themselves and to everyone else around them that the pressure is finally off.
But the reality is, the closing of that one contract didn't magically alter the trajectory of her long-term financial needs.
It didn't change her retirement horizon or her macro survival number.
So why would it radically change how she spent her money on a random Tuesday night?
The framework offers a rule that should be written on every single credit card. Don't let a good week write a check a bad month has to cash.
That is so good. Don't let a good week write a check a bad month has to cash.
Most people operate on a hedonic treadmill, where their spending expands violently to consume any increase in income or temporary emotional highs.
If they have a good week, they reward themselves by increasing their baseline of consumption.
But the quietly wealthy, the ones building that second ledger, successfully detach their daily consumption from their immediate emotional state or their most recent windfall.
And the best part is, you don't need a six-figure salary to implement this today. You can stop the panic spending or the celebratory spending right now with whatever small amount you possess.
The behavioral restraint must precede the accumulation of capital.
The restraint builds the container, and eventually the money fills it. But relying on willpower and your memory to maintain that restraint is incredibly dangerous.
We are phenomenal at rationalizing our own behavior.
We really are. Which leads into the next crucial step, escaping what the framework calls the memory trap through ruthless documentation.
Human memory is not a recording device. It is a storytelling mechanism.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
And when it comes to our own financial habits, we are deeply invested in telling ourselves a heroic or at least an acceptable narrative.
We deploy self-serving bias to protect our egos from the reality of our choices.
The narrator of this framework experienced this firsthand. He finally sat down and opened a painfully simple spreadsheet.
No complex algorithms, right? Just tracking money in versus money out month by month.
And he noted that the first time he looked at it honestly, he felt physically ill.
Because he was bankrupt.
No, it wasn't because he was bankrupt. It was because the spreadsheet completely shattered the fictional story he had been living inside for years.
He had convinced himself through a series of mental gymnastics that he was saving roughly 15% of his income.
But the unedited spreadsheet revealed the mathematical truth. It was closer to 4%.
4%.
Yeah.
And no malicious financial advisor lied to him. No bank defrauded him.
He quietly, efficiently defrauded himself for 2 entire years just by avoiding the friction of looking at the actual numbers.
He assumed his good intentions equaled good results.
This is why relying on memory for your finances is catastrophic.
The spreadsheet, or even just a cheap physical notebook, removes the emotion, the justification, and the ego. It acts as an impartial judge.
As the author notes, a budget isn't a restrictive cage designed to punish you. It is a highly accurate diary of who you are becoming, logged one single decision at a time.
Relying on your memory to assess your financial health is like walking through a funhouse at a carnival, looking in a heavily warped mirror and thinking, wow, I look fantastic. I'm so tall and athletic.
Right, you see what you want to see.
The spreadsheet is the high-definition photograph taken under harsh fluorescent lighting. It is absolutely brutal to look at initially, but it is the only thing that is actually real.
And stepping into that harsh lighting fundamentally changes your posture.
Yeah.
The transition from a state of passive hope, hoping there is enough left at the end of the month, hoping you are saving enough, to a state of active knowing.
You stop trusting your deeply flawed internal narrator and you start trusting the math on the page.
But here is the massive hurdle for someone listening who is starting from absolute zero.
Okay, let's say they take this to heart. They look at the brutal spreadsheet. They confront the fact that they are saving 4% instead of 15.
That confrontation naturally generates a massive wall of questions about what to do next.
Where do I put the money? What is an index fund? What even is inflation?
And the biggest barrier for a beginner is the paralyzing belief that they have to wait for an expert to formally teach them the answers.
Overcoming that learned helplessness is the next phase of the framework. It focuses on taking the reins through two foundational engines.
Applied curiosity and unwavering reliability.
Let's unpack the curiosity aspect because the narrator confronts the ultimate universal excuse. Nobody taught me this in school.
And I completely empathize with this. Nobody sat me down in high school and explained the magic of compound interest either.
Nobody taught me how marginal tax brackets work or what a Roth IRA was. It feels like a massive systemic failure of the education system.
It absolutely is a systemic failure. And honestly, the financial industry often intentionally uses complex jargon to act as a gatekeeping mechanism.
To keep everyday people intimidated and reliant on expensive advisors.
Exactly. But acknowledging that systemic failure does not give you permission to use it as a permanent excuse for inaction.
The narrator admits he used that exact excuse as a shield for years. How am I supposed to know how to invest? I'm not a Wall Street guy.
But then he had a very quiet revelation. One random Tuesday evening, instead of mindlessly scrolling through a streaming service or watching television,
He spent exactly 10 minutes on his phone. He just typed a basic, supposedly stupid financial question into a search engine.
a question he had been too embarrassed to ask his friends out loud.
10 minutes of applied, self-directed curiosity.
That is the entire secret. He realized the wall standing between him and basic financial literacy wasn't a lack of capital, and it wasn't a lack of access to elite circles.
The barrier was simply the 10 minutes he chose to spend on comfortable distraction every single night.
The framework makes a brilliant point here. You don't need to memorize the incredibly complex, constantly changing IRS contribution limits for various retirement accounts.
You don't need to understand the underlying mechanics of a mutual fund.
You just need to know that the account actually exists. You just need to learn the vocabulary.
It's a massive paradigm shift regarding agency. Curiosity is the key that turns the lock.
We live in an unprecedented era where the entirety of human financial knowledge is freely accessible, right from a device in your pocket.
The barrier to entry is no longer intellect or status. It is simply the willingness to endure 10 minutes of feeling ignorant while you read an introductory article.
We all sit around expecting this grand red carpet invitation to financial literacy. We wait for a guru to descend and hand us a personalized step-by-step manual tailored to our exact life.
But the reality is, financial literacy is just a rusty, unglamorous side door. Nobody is going to open it for you. You have to push it open yourself with a 10-minute internet search on a Tuesday night.
And once that initial burst of curiosity gets you through the door and into the room, the second engine is what determines if you get to stay there.
That engine is reliability. It is the currency of your word.
The tone of the source material gets very serious here. It moves away from numbers and accounts and focuses entirely on character.
It's about whether people can unconditionally count on you. Do you pay the small loan back on the exact day you promised? Do you show up to the meeting when you said you would?
And critically, do you execute on these promises, not because a bank is threatening to ruin your credit score, but simply because you attached your name to the commitment?
The narrator shares a story about a rough financial patch where he missed a single, relatively small payment to a friend who had helped him out.
And he rationalized it to himself, right?
Yeah, he thought, it's no big deal, it's just a few days late, my friend knows I'm good for it. But months later, that same friend asked the narrator for a very minor favor, just covering a small expense until payday.
And the narrator noticed a distinct, split-second hesitation in his friend's voice.
A micro expression of lost trust.
The friend wasn't entirely certain the narrator would follow through, based entirely on that one prior data point.
The narrator noted that hearing that hesitation stung infinitely more than the embarrassment of the missed payment ever did.
It took him years to rebuild that trust, and more importantly, to rebuild his trust in himself as a reliable entity.
This illustrates perfectly how reputation functions as a shadow currency in the second ledger.
Think about this structurally. 15 years of making completely on-time car payments or consistently paying back small favors is not a compelling story.
Nobody throws you a parade for doing exactly what you said you were going to do for a decade.
But that boring, highly predictable reliability is quietly compounding in the minds of everyone in your network.
There's a quote here that defines this perfectly. Your reputation reaches the room before you do. That's wealth long before the money shows up to confirm it.
If you are hyper-reliable, you become a magnet for opportunity. People want to do business with you. They want to partner with you on ventures. They want to recommend you for jobs.
Game theory dictates that in repeated social interactions, the most reliable actors eventually attract the most resources.
Your reliability is an entry in the second ledger that eventually, inevitably, forces massive payouts in the first ledger.
So 10 minutes of curiosity gets you moving, and unshakable reliability keeps you in the game. But how do you accelerate the actual learning curve?
Because frankly, relying solely on 10-minute Google searches means you're going to be learning everything from scratch, making every possible rookie mistake along the way.
You accelerate the process by borrowing time and experience from someone who has already navigated the minefield. You have to cultivate honest, ego-free conversations with the right people.
The narrator of our framework found his person entirely by accident. It wasn't a formal financial advisor. It was an older gentleman who used to work with his father.
This guy had retired early, lived an incredibly unflashy life, and drove the exact same weather truck for over a decade.
They ended up having lunch one day, and the older guy asked the narrator a question that I think every single person listening should write down and use.
He asked, "What is the most you've ever lost on something, and what did you actually learn from it?"
That is a masterfully designed question.
Why do you say that?
Because it immediately bypasses all the ego defense mechanisms. It establishes a baseline of shared vulnerability.
Exactly. The narrator initially tried to dodge it. He tried to give some polished, smart-sounding answer about market fluctuations.
But the older guy just laughed, saw right through it, and said, try again. And this time, don't try to make yourself sound smart.
So the narrator finally admitted to a profoundly stupid investment he made at 24, simply because a guy at the office promised it was a sure thing.
And the reaction of the mentor figure is crucial here. There was zero judgment. He likely nodded, recognizing the exact same arrogance or naivety that he himself had exhibited decades prior.
But the most impactful detail in this entire sequence isn't the verbal advice the older man gave. It is a physical action he took at the very end of the meal.
This detail stuck with me too.
The waiter drops off the check. The older guy pays, takes the paper receipt, folds it meticulously in half, and tucks it into a specific pocket in his wallet.
He didn't study it. He didn't obsess over it. It was just a deeply ingrained, automatic, physical habit.
When the narrator asked him why he did that, the older man just shrugged and said he liked knowing where his money went. Even the small stuff. Especially the small stuff.
Witnessing that one minor automatic habit imparted more financial wisdom to the narrator than reading a textbook ever could.
By engaging in that honest, vulnerable conversation, the narrator essentially downloaded 20 years of this man's lived experience into his own brain.
He learned that wealth isn't about complex algorithms. It's about folded receipts and acknowledging your own stupidity.
He effectively saved himself 2 decades of painful trial and error. Borrow their 20 years and it will save you 20 mistakes.
The people who parade around looking like they figured out the entire financial world completely on their own are lying.
They just conveniently omit the names of the people who guided them, corrected them, and saved them from ruin.
So we've established the need for invisible discipline, strategic thinking, ruthless documentation, and mentors. But this brings us to the final component, which addresses the massive psychological block most people have when they hear all of this.
Because I think a lot of people listen to this, track your receipts, skip the celebratory drinks, stare at brutal spreadsheets, stay completely silent about your wins, and they think, building wealth sounds utterly suffocatingly miserable. Why would I want to live like that?
It is the most pervasive and damaging misconception in personal finance. We have created this false dichotomy in our culture.
That you must either embrace absolute monastic suffering and deprivation today, or you will be destitute tomorrow.
We believe wealth is synonymous with delayed misery.
But the framework actively shatters this myth by bringing us back to the story of Miss Anne. The narrator says, wait, that's not what I saw.
Miss Anne, the woman sitting on $22 million, did not live a miserable, deprived life.
She had her daily routines, she had her quiet pleasures, she made an ordinary Tuesday feel completely hers. She simply didn't confuse the concept of comfort with the concept of excess.
The author provides a beautiful visual to articulate this difference. Imagine a Sunday morning. A person wakes up and chooses to meticulously brew a cup of coffee at home instead of getting in their car and driving to an expensive cafe.
They don't do this because they are broke.
No, and they don't do this because they are punishing themselves for some financial sin. They do it because they have calculated that they would genuinely rather sit on their own quiet porch for 20 extra minutes enjoying the silence than sit in a stressful, idling line of cars at a drive-thru.
It's about the agency of the choice. And then, later that exact same day, that same person might spend real significant money on something that actually moves the needle for their happiness.
They might pay for a beautiful dinner out with their closest friends or book a weekend trip they've been researching for months.
It reminds me of the concept of money dials cutting costs mercilessly on the things that don't bring you joy so you can spend extravagantly on the few things that do.
Exactly. From the outside, a superficial observer would call that behavior highly inconsistent. They would say, look at this person, they're too cheap to buy a $5 latte, but they will drop $500 on a weekend getaway. They are hypocrites.
But it is the exact opposite of inconsistent. It is an expression of supreme intentionality.
Delayed joy isn't wealth. Choosing your joy carefully, that is wealth.
I found this section to be incredibly liberating. The financial industry often implies that discipline means living in a dark cave, eating unflavored oatmeal, and hating your life until you are 65.
But Miss Anne wearing that same gray coat for a decade, it wasn't a painful, grinding sacrifice?
She wasn't standing in front of the mirror crying because she couldn't buy a designer jacket. It was just a settled, peaceful choice made by a woman who knew exactly what she needed and who refused to let the world convince her to buy things she didn't want.
She kept one eye focused intently on her daily reality, and one eye focused clearly on the decades ahead of her, and both eyes were fully open. She wasn't depriving herself. She was prioritizing herself.
That is the ultimate definition of financial clarity. All right, we have covered immense ground here. We've discussed the necessity of silence, the mechanics of non-transactional networking, the danger of micromath and cognitive bandwidth.
And the brutal honesty of documentation, the twin engines of curiosity and reliability, and the intentionality of joy.
But let's bring this entirely out of the theoretical and right down to the ground. For the listener sitting in their car, walking their dog right now, the person who has never tracked a single dollar, who feels completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of this shift.
What exactly happens the moment this deep dive ends?
This is where we transition to the highly specific, actionable step-by-step plan for day one, and the framework issues a massive critical warning right out of the gate.
Yes, a giant red flag for the overachievers listening. Do not, under any circumstances, try to adopt all of these behaviors tonight.
If you attempt to completely overhaul your personality in one evening, if you try to become a master of silence, a strategic networker, a spreadsheet wizard, and an expert in tax-advantaged retirement accounts all before you go to sleep, the psychological friction will completely overwhelm your system.
You will experience ego depletion, and you will abandon the entire project by Thursday morning.
So what is the actual tangible plan for the absolute beginner? What is the very first entry they need to make to open their personal second ledger?
The directive is brilliantly, almost frustratingly simple. Tonight, when you have a moment of quiet, open a blank notes app on your phone or grab a physical piece of paper and a pen and write down one honest number.
Just one number. We aren't building a 50-line item budget.
Just one single number. You're going to look at your accounts and write down exactly what you have right now.
Not a projection of what you hope your balance will be after your next paycheck.
Not a guilt-ridden estimate of what you think you should have accumulated by this point in your life. Just the unvarnished mathematical truth of what is currently sitting to your name.
No categorizing past spending. No 20-year compound interest projections.
Absolutely none of that. You do not need a comprehensive master plan yet. You do not need to fix your entire financial life tonight. The sole objective of this exercise is to remove the crushing anxiety of guessing.
Because the guessing is what actually paralyzes us. When you don't know the real number, your brain does one of two things.
It either assumes a catastrophic worst-case scenario that terrifies you into inaction,
Or it falsely inflates the number to make you feel comfortable enough to keep ignoring the problem. Writing it down is like turning on the light in a dark room. It forces the funhouse mirror to shatter.
precisely. There is a profound, measurable psychological release in this micro step. It acts as a form of exposure therapy for financial anxiety.
Writing down that first honest number forcibly transitions you from a state of passive, fearful avoidance to a state of active, grounded awareness.
That single, completely unremarkable entry on a random Tuesday night is the exact same way Miss Ann's 50-year journey to $22 million began.
It is staggering to think about it in those terms. I try to picture Miss Anne, decades ago, sitting at a small table in that rent-controlled apartment, writing down her very first number.
It probably felt incredibly small.
It probably didn't feel historic or like the beginning of a massive empire, but that is the ultimate trick of compounding, isn't it? The start of a 50-year journey never actually feels like the start.
It doesn't come with a soundtrack.
It just feels like sitting alone in your living room, writing a small, slightly uncomfortable number on a piece of paper.
But the magic is that tomorrow, you wake up and you are no longer guessing. You are anchored in reality.
That realization is the bedrock foundation of the second ledger. Every other habit we discuss, the discipline, the strategic planning, the eventual wealth, can only grow from that one honest entry.
So, to synthesize this entire journey for you listening, building lasting, generational wealth is significantly less about what you display and announce to the world.
And it is almost entirely about the quiet, unglamorous promises you keep to yourself in that second ledger. It is the thousands of micro decisions you make in the shadows that ultimately define what happens when the spotlight is finally on you.
The behavior is the purchase. The money is simply the receipt that arrives in the mail decades later.
We have spent this entire time marveling at Miss Anne's incredible first ledger, that shocking $22 million reveal. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on that reframes her entire legacy.
What if the greatest tragedy of Miss Ann's story isn't that nobody in her building knew about her millions while she was alive?
What if the real tragedy is that nobody inherited her second ledger? Imagine if, alongside all that capital, she had left behind a physical, written diary of those 50 years.
A record of those quiet habits, those internal mindset shifts, the moment she chose the porch over the cafe, and those meticulously folded lunch receipts.
As you sit down tonight to start your own journey with that one honest number, consider this. As you build your wealth over the next few decades, how will you ensure that you pass down the behavior and not just the receipt?